Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 861. Progress of the Evacuation. Ascendant Zion gulped as he watched the bedlam being wrought in the sky. Several winged creatures shot across the heavens with terrifying speed. But with even more terrifying velocity, strange distinctive beings crashed into the winged creatures, mercilessly and wickedly tearing them apart before they got a chance to dive downward. Of course, as effortless as the tearing process appeared to his eyes, these distinctive creatures still encountered considerable resistance during their assault. Nonetheless, it was appalling to witness. Only Sage Rian and his creatures were containing the situation in the sky, and they were facing behemoths. He felt his throat grow desert dry. Over and over again, he tried to surmise how powerful each one of the guy's subordinates must be. Sages? Ascendants? Paragons? It typically took a paragon to take on a behemoth. Depending on the kind of ascendant, if they had rich experience spanning around 10 years, a honed combat style, and had managed to prepare thoroughly for battle, they could probably handle a hazardous or disastrous behemoth. But calamity? Catastrophe? They wouldn't even dare. I wouldn't even dare. A fresh ascendant like him couldn't even come close. He had achieved his rank merely 4 months ago, and had come to the trade city hoping for vacation and rest. But his rotten luck had led him to this predicament instead of the peaceful respite he sought. Someone like him could never handle a hazardous behemoth. His hands might shatter from a single strike. And yet, he focused on Night Terror, who ferociously, relentlessly, and persistently slashed at the winged behemoths. Sometimes the creature would use its lower hands to swing swords while wielding viciously curved claws with its upper limbs. Zion shifted his gaze to the being he had thought strange. That one just hopped from one abomination to another. But Zion could see the precision in each step. Even though the abominations flew with unstoppable speed, the creature would simply shift and jump, landing just as another abomination hurtled toward it. It was almost as if it was anticipating their movements. Then there was the human who cleanly followed with his own unerringly accurate strikes, shattering creatures with ferocious, enraged attacks. He would shout gruesomely as he clashed with some abominations, as if they had stolen something precious from him. There were several others too, and honestly, Zion just wanted to remain rooted to his spot, watching with cold excitement as they engaged the monsters with overwhelming power. But he also had other things to do. Ascendant Zion shifted his stance and frowned with evident seriousness as he watched people maintain a line and trail into the tall rift standing before the fountain, leading to the illusionary haven. The air vibrated with disturbing shrieks and distant crashes. Orders echoed from drifters far ahead, cascading down the chain of command. People wept openly, a tense and melancholic atmosphere enveloping the evacuation, a saddening mixture of panic, confusion, sobbing children, frantic parents, and fearful glances skyward made the air heavy and burdensome to breathe. A young man rushed toward him and bowed quickly, speaking with a hurried, repertorial voice. "This is the last line of civilians, sir. The next shall be those in the hall. But there's a little problem." Ascendant Zion frowned as he studied the young drifter's uneasy gaze. "Speak on. There's a lot of opinions circulating. Certain merchants feel they don't know the state of where they're going. As far as they're concerned, it might be another trap. They're demanding the Paragon himself escort them out and protect them personally. Some refuse to leave their precious goods. The drifters among them are rather devastated and contest that they can't push through a monster-infested forest when there's a safe place. They claim we're misaligning priorities." Ascendant Zion remained silent for several heartbeats. A tense frown creased his features, his brown eyes gleaming with obstinacy. "It seems we have quite an issue on the ground." The fellow drifter standing guard before him nodded and awaited his response with focused intensity. Ascendant Zion crossed his arms, contemplating deeply for a moment. Of course, he could understand some concerns, but some people were just so infuriatingly short-sighted. The merchants had been thorns in everyone's side since the beginning of the blockade. First, they hoarded resources, refusing to release supplies for the entire populace to survive on. Eventually they relented, but only with strictly controlled distribution, prioritizing themselves over others when rationing their goods. Many couldn't blame them entirely. They were merchants who'd rather perish than squander resources. A handful would face bankruptcy after this ordeal concluded, forced to scavenge to rebuild, if they survived at all. Paragon Rizel had shown patience with them to some extent, but when his tolerance waned, he resorted to threats. That had prompted their reluctant release of goods, though they maintained control through deception or manipulation. The drifters, too, were being foolish. Their inflated sense of importance led them to believe they deserved protection over civilians who didn't benefit the world as much as they did. Of course, there were more sensible drifters than these moronic ones. Ascendant Zion exhaled deeply and refocused on the young drifter. Just focus on those willing to evacuate. Separate them from the rest and begin their immediate relocation. Take a group of elites and prevent the resistant drifters from forcing their way into line. You can request Sage Mac's assistance with that. Don't resort to violence unless absolutely unavoidable, and even then, ensure no fatalities. We've lost enough people. He paused and glanced at the busy Paragon Rizel, then upward before returning his gaze to the young man. Right now, people are risking their lives fighting to protect everyone. It would be quite the shame if we were fighting amongst ourselves and killing each other. Yes, sir. The drifter responded with vigilant urgency and rushed away, leaving Ascendant Zion to himself. The Ascendant looked upward, his face draining of color. Sage Rian is fighting, we have Sage Rama and his brother on standby, and everything seems to be under control now. But would we be able to persist? He couldn't answer the question himself. Everything appeared stable for the moment, but the worst was yet to come. And more ominously, there was a terrifyingly massive hand hanging from the rift. Just in that moment, a disturbing sound made the Ascendant pause his thoughts. Then he shifted his gaze to his side and raised his brow in confusion. The healer? What is he doing? Chapter 862. A different enemy. Ascendant Zion stared at the healer, his brow furrowing with bewilderment. Braham continued to drag himself backward while his body lurched forward, as though an invisible chain yanked him toward some unseen destination. He caught Ascendant Zion's perplexed gaze and waved a dismissive hand. Oh, please don't mind me. Something is just... Stop. Moving. His voice crescendoed into a shout as he stomped his feet against the ground, muscles straining like taut bowstrings as he fought against the mysterious force propelling him forward. Never had he experienced anything like this. The armor, gifted by that peculiar drifter who'd insisted on healing his girlfriend, had impressed Braham upon inspection. Its defense capabilities were unmatched, impenetrable as mountain stone. Yet today it behaved with a will of its own. Since the Battle of the Behemoths began, the armor had been dragging him relentlessly from his private parlor, the sanctuary he'd carefully established for himself. In this blockade, Braham stood as the most precious resource. Merchants and drifters alike swarmed around him like moths to flame. They would sacrifice limbs without hesitation to ensure his safety, knowing he could restore whatever they lost. Should he perish, their doom would follow swiftly. It wasn't hyperbole to say they'd endured this long solely because of who he was. Braham. The Paragon's presence and everyone's collective efforts certainly contributed to their survival during this blockade, preventing total annihilation. But Braham savored the notion that he remained the linchpin of their continued existence. His self-imposed seclusion made perfect sense. Yet the armor's pull grew stronger, tugging him forward with increasing urgency that rattled his bones. It had begun when those strange winged abominations took flight and bizarre creatures started leaping through the air with unnatural agility. Braham couldn't explain it, but somehow he understood the armor's desire. It yearned to join them, craved it with an almost sentient hunger. The knowledge of this desire manifested in his mind without explanation. He wanted nothing to do with that place. So he fought against the pull, muscles burning with each backward step. After noting how the ascendant observed him with that unnerving stare, like watching a man dance with an invisible partner, Braham finally surrendered. He dismissed the armor with a thought and collapsed to the ground as the powerful force vanished, leaving him suddenly untethered and free. He chuckled forcibly and waved a dismissive hand, then strutted toward the ascendant with feigned confidence. Is that the safe haven, by the way? Where we'll be relocating until all this blows over? Ascendant Zion glanced at the towering rift before returning his gaze to Braham, expression flat as still water. We. He paused deliberately, letting the single word hang in the air. What do you mean, we? The only people entering that haven are civilians. All drifters are pushing through the blockade and evacuating to Variolania. Braham froze, his face darkening like storm clouds gathering. Are you insane? Do you even hear the nonsense spilling from your mouth? You want me, the very reason you've all survived until now, to follow you through the blockade all the way to Variolania? What is this, some deranged suicide mission? The ascendant tilted his head, bird-like in his curiosity.
Suicide mission?
Not at all. With you by our side, we can heal endlessly and press forward. And I hear your talent works with nature. We'll literally be cutting through a forest. Braham's face flushed crimson, his complexion growing dangerously dark. What rubbish are you spouting? Listen carefully. My ability takes time to work. Where's the makeshift infirmary for the injured while I'm working? What happens if I myself fall? Ascendant Zion's lips curled into a smirk. I thought you prided yourself as a survivor of the Dark Continent? What now? Trembling at the prospect of facing a few hundred monsters, Braham covered his face with his palm, fingers pressing into his forehead in frustration. You truly are a fool. What do you know about the Dark Continent? Keep that place out of your filthy mouth. I am not going to Variolania or pushing through any blockade. You can all perish for all I care, but over my dead body will I join this suicide march. The ascendant stood tall, shoulders squared as his voice boomed through the space between them. No problem then, but you'll also be denied entry to this safe haven, healer. So go away from this place. Braham's eyes ignited with dangerous emerald light, glowing like twin beacons of fury. And who's going to stop me? Ascendant Zion raised one corner of his mouth, a predator's smile spreading across his face. You should reconsider those words you just uttered. You're literally standing before an ascendant. Braham grinned cockily, chin tilting upward in defiance. Am I now? The two glared at each other, their hostility crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Before their battle of wills could escalate further, a more domineering presence swept over the landscape, a suffocating pressure that crushed down upon everything in its path. Both Ascendant Zion and Braham instantly crumbled to their knees, faces draining of color, eyes widening with primal fear. The same terrifying question echoed through both their minds. What is happening? What is this horrific bloodthirst? It felt like countless razor-sharp blades, not ordinary weapons but instruments of death bathed in oceans of slaughter, their mere existence enough to make even the strongest will falter and break. The very air grew heavy with malice, each breath a struggle against invisible hands that threatened to choke the life from their lungs. Paragon Rizel, who had been holding an amputated hand while a charred creature knelt motionless before him, glanced up with a grave expression etched into his features. Something uniquely evil permeated this pressure, different from the waves that had been raining down upon them thus far. And it couldn't have been the pressure of his precious mentee Ral. Though Ral could certainly emanate such bloodthirst, this presence was unrefined, raw, and fundamentally primal. Unless Ral had somehow transformed into a creature that had endured centuries of repeated slaughter without dying, growing to hate existence itself, there was no way he could produce a bloodthirst so untamed and ancient. The paragon tightened his grip on the head of the kneeling monster. Immediately, its skull began to collapse inward, compressing like paper under an invisible vice. The pressure intensified until the head burst into a pulp of viscous black blood, splattering across the paragon's impassive face. He shifted his gaze skyward, eyes narrowing at whatever new threat loomed above. I guess it's time to join the fray. Chapter 863, Dawn of Devilish Belials. Northern barely exerted himself, his body weaving through the air like a phantom wind, dealing devastation with minimal effort. Yet Northern's minimal proved catastrophic for the behemoth monsters. Their wings shredded like tissue paper under his touch, their massive forms teetering at death's edge before Northern's summons delivered the final blow. Northern harbored no concerns about gathering talent fragments. Kills by his summons counted as his own. The battle unfolded with unexpected gentleness, the softest confrontation he'd experienced thus far. This softness created a jarring contrast against the oppressive atmosphere of destruction surrounding him. A nagging sensation crept through Northern's mind. Something felt wrong, like something different was approaching. He could, if desired, employ Chaos Eyes to glimpse his future, but certain abilities Northern had decided to get comfortable not using because of its cost and some other things. He had attempted several times, and though successfully utilizing the foresight of Chaos Eyes, integrating it into his combat art hadn't come naturally. Such integration required him to perpetually dwell in the future. Despite Northern's enhanced battle intelligence, some abilities taxed his mental capacity beyond reasonable limits. His mind, formidable as it was, had boundaries. Thus far, extensive use of Chaos Eyes continued to burden him considerably. I guess I just have to wait it out. The instant this thought completed itself in Northern's mind, a dark scowl transformed his features. His blue eyes glinted with wariness, like ice catching dangerous light. Each of his summons, engaged with various behemoths, simultaneously felt the terrifying aura ripple through the battlefield. Night Terror, in the midst of shredding and abomination, froze suddenly. His shoulders quivered, and his flaming red gaze shifted toward the rift. Black Mamba likewise halted abruptly but recovered swiftly, harvesting the head of his opponent with one fluid sword stroke before his eyes narrowed to watchful slits. The battle paused momentarily. The overwhelming pressure commanded attention, no being strong enough to recognize it could look away. This new presence dwarfed everything that had transpired, reducing previous conflicts to mere child's play. Has the Leviathan found a way to emerge? Northern frowned as he observed the rift, glancing down to one of his roofs where the Crimson Lord stood vigilant, awaiting command. The Crimson Lord constituted an army unto himself. His soul contained multitudes. A spearman, a spellcaster, a knight, and two others wielding strange weapons, not to mention the Crimson Lord himself. This embodied a Belial power, and was what marked him as an apex creature. Still, Northern couldn't shake the feeling that he had defeated the Crimson Lord with surprising ease, considering the legendary power Belials supposedly possessed. The Crimson Lord, a Belial himself, remained stationary by Northern's command, poised for the moment when fellow Belials would breach the rift. They were the final rank to overcome before anyone might witness progress from the trapped hand. Northern shifted his gaze to the rift. Today, I will know how strong and powerful a Belial is truly supposed to be. As this thought crystallized, the entire dark sky rippled with a thunderous sound like reality itself tearing apart, causing Northern to scowl immediately. Paragon Rizel suddenly arrived beside him. What's the situation? Not exactly sudden, considering how Northern remained unshaken and responded casually as though he'd anticipated the Paragon's arrival. The behemoths are being contained. I don't know, but I think the next creatures to emerge will be Belials. They'll likely surpass anything we've encountered thus far. Northern shifted his gaze to study the Paragon's face after speaking. Paragon Rizel folded his arms, squinting at the rift. After several heartbeats of silence, Ral. Northern paused before responding. Yes. Have you ever heard of the danger level devil? Northern considered briefly, shrugged and nodded slightly. Yes, I have. They're quite rare, though. It's easier to encounter an apex than to find something classified as devil or abysmal danger level. Paragon Rizel turned to Northern, wincing. Apex creatures aren't exactly common either. I believe you possess truly rotten luck. Northern gulped, finding himself momentarily speechless. Thankfully, the paragon seemed intent on other matters, waving off his own comment to continue his initial point. Devils and abysmals exist as categories forced into the monster ranking system so they wouldn't stand apart. They had to integrate somehow. But I tell you, I've encountered creatures of those ranks, not often, but the 2 times I have, I received terrifying confirmation that they simply don't belong within our conventional ranking system. Rizel sighed and clasped Northern's shoulder, his gaze fixed on the rift, which pulsed like an infected wound. Sadly, I believe this may be the 3rd such encounter. Brace yourself, kid. This won't be an easy fight. Northern observed the paragon's somber expression for a few moments, his eyes laser-focused. Then he exhaled and a crooked grin crawled across his face like a predator claiming territory. So what? Since I returned from the Dark Continent, I've craved nothing more than a genuine challenge. Devil Belials? Hell, I'm so exhilarated I could piss my pants right now. The paragon stood awestruck. His eyes remained fixed on Northern, widened and frozen like a startled deer. With the suffocating pressure bearing down on them, such brazen words defied all expectations. The way this oppressive force devoured the night's cold winds testified to everything the paragon had warned about. He'd merely voiced what was painfully evident. The pressure had grown so intense that people on the ground struggled to remain standing, while many lower-ranked drifters had already collapsed unconscious. The only reason he, Northern, and these strange allied creatures hadn't been flattened by the overwhelming force was their exceptional strength. This realization further cemented in the paragon's mind just how remarkable Northern truly was. As this thought crystallized, the rift rippled again, violent and hungry. Something monstrous was tearing its way through, like a birth no world should witness. All of Lithia watched transfixed as black, ominous sparks erupted thunderously with each sinister pulse of the rift, like lightning born from nightmares. Northern observed with unnerving calm, his face a mask of stone as the first creature emerged. The structure defied natural law. It resembled a human skeleton, but its hands were crossed over its chest and fused together. No, not fused. It was as though they had never existed as separate entities at all. Colossal wings stretched farther than those of the behemoths, their skeletal framework adorned with jagged, charred spikes where feathers should have been. The appendages hung like tattered funeral shrouds against the dark sky. 3 jagged horns twisted outward from its skull, writhing like serpents frozen in agony. Its eye sockets burned with round crimson light, the perfect visage of a true devil. The sinister aura it radiated matched its unholy appearance. Northern recognized something familiar about all devils he had encountered, despite their rarity. That same ominous essence clung to Night Terror as well. Speaking of Night Terror, all 4 of his eyes narrowed to slits, their burning red flames dimming momentarily like candles caught in a sudden draft. The next instant, Night Terror became imperceptible, slicing through the air with unprecedented speed. Northern had never witnessed such velocity from him. He blurred across the battlefield and materialized sharply before the devilish Belial, swinging not just his claws but also wielding his imperceptible and invisible cleaves, deadly weapons that existed beyond normal sight. But the creature merely tilted its demonic head sideways with casual disdain, allowing something unseen to pass harmlessly by. Its hand had already captured Night Terror's wrist, gripping with such monstrous force that fractures spiderwebbed through Night Terror's seemingly indestructible limb. Northern's eyes widened in disbelief. This devil was about to obliterate Night Terror with barely a single attack. Chapter 864. The Might of a Paragon. Northern frowned at what he saw. The devil clearly held Night Terror's hand, crushing it with an iron grip. But the troubling aspect of this beholden sight was that the devil's hands remained merged together against its chest. The whole thing had happened so fast that Northern just assumed it blocked Night Terror's fist. But something was amiss. Night Terror had 4 arms. 4. But studying the terrifying terror of the night, Northern could no longer count 4 hands. And Night Terror, the Night Terror he knew so well, should have been winding back for another attack with another arm. But couldn't. Instead, The creature clutched Night Terror's only arm and still had 3 left to spare. The 3 that immediately lunged forward, smashing holes into Night Terror's black lustrous body like spears through obsidian. Northern's face drained of color, his expression frozen in horror at the impossible scene unfolding before him. With widened eyes, Night Terror vanished, retreating back to the embrace of limitless void. The creature froze mid-motion, tilting its head, its pool of bloody eyes dilating slightly at the empty space. Then the creature turned with deliberate slowness, its gaze somehow finding Northern. As the devil's eyes shifted to him, Northern felt a glacial sensation invade his entire body. Something unnatural lurked behind the way it turned to him. Behind the eerie movement lingered something that resembled reason, intent, a kind of knowing that should not exist in such a being. Then, a line broke across the creature's face, starting at the jaw, curving upward to reveal a row of razor-sharp teeth glinting like daggers in the darkness. A dark, malevolent chill crawled up Northern's spine as horror etched itself across his face. Is it smiling? A monster? Smiling? He had never witnessed or heard of such a thing. Of course, strangeness often accompanied monsters, especially those that fell into the catastrophic level. Moving up the danger level, finding intelligent monsters wasn't unusual. But this was nothing like that. This was wrong. Fundamentally wrong. A monster battling you and learning from your attacks showed intelligence. Using the environment against you displayed intelligence. Knowing when to retreat, hide, and strike again demonstrated intelligence. But this was an unsettling smile that festered with something beyond mere cognition. It was purpose incarnate. Northern forced out a grin, teeth clenched tight as stone. Okay, you bastard. You want to have a go at it? Let's have a go at it. He tensed to move when Paragon Rizel placed a firm hand on his shoulder once more. Northern looked at the Paragon, who in turn shook his head, eyes steeled with determination. Let me take care of this. Northern frowned. Huh? You want to? Are you sure you'll be able to handle that? The Paragon smacked the back of his head immediately, causing Northern to yelp in surprise. Ow! Did you forget I am the Paragon here? The strongest drifter in this blockade. Northern folded his arms and fixed Rizel with a stern gaze, unwavering as stone. I wouldn't be so sure. Paragon Rizel opened his mouth to retaliate, but instead released a weary sigh and shook his head. This is not exactly the time for bickering. Step back. Let me take care of this. Do not worry about me, I will survive. I am curious about that dark continent thing you mentioned. Northern regarded the man with pitiful eyes. Shouldn't you be surviving for the sake of your wife and unborn child? There's that too. The Paragon flashed him a confident smile and slowly flowed forward as if carried by invisible currents. Yet again, there was something distinctive about how his flight power worked. Northern observed with keen eyes, his mind cataloging every detail. It looks like what he did with those monsters. As though he had trapped himself in a stationary point. This explained why he could float. Yet he could also speak and move freely despite being anchored to this fixed position. The destroyers too could turn their heads. One had even managed to move completely. Although Northern suspected the Paragon had released his hold on that particular one. Either way, he was certain it was the same principle that the Paragon was using to fly. The only thing that piqued his curiosity was how Rizel managed to move with such fluid grace. Paragon Rizel glided to a halt before the creature, which still hovered in the air with that malevolent grin stretched across its face like a wound. First and foremost, the Paragon commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Wipe that annoying smirk off your face and go down. Immediately, a frightening wind-tearing shockwave erupted in the air, compressed like a vice before unleashing its full fury upon the devilish Belial. As the shockwave resounded, a vibration assaulted everyone to their very souls. The place trembled as that thunderous burst roared through the night like a primeval beast. Beneath the raw power of the shockwave, the creature hurled downward, crashing into the ground with bone-shattering force. Paragon Rizel glared down with satisfaction etched across his face. Then he descended with blistering speed, making the ground groan and spew a fountain of debris as he landed. The Paragon's jade-green eyes fixated on the monster. In an instant, he vanished, materializing next to the creature as it struggled to its feet. Paragon Rizel's fist sliced through the air, aiming to crush the creature's charred skin. Well, at least that was what was supposed to happen. Instead, a disturbing frown settled on the Paragon's face. As the creature moved, he quickly vanished, reappearing at a distance from the creature. It appeared as though he had merely blinked in and out of existence. But he was just that fast in that moment, so blindingly quick that the path he traveled showed its reaction only after he reached his destination. Cracks spiderwebbing across the ground, subtle debris lifting into the air. Following the rise of the debris, the wind itself carved a long gash in the ground where he had been, as if a colossal invisible blade had sliced through the earth. The gash opened a chasm in the middle of the city that stretched all the way to the fountain, crushing it and causing water to splash viciously skyward like liquid shrapnel. The people being evacuated suddenly faced immediate disaster. Some were flung away by the diminishing yet still formidable force. Many staggered backward, falling upon each other, shattering the delicate queue they had formed. Northern, watching from the sky, felt the blood drain from his face. Isn't that? Chapter 865, Test Run. How the devilish Belial had torn Night Terror's 3 arms off remained a mystery, even minutes later. There was nothing capable of escaping Northern's gaze, so he was certain it was not by conventional means. Something the creature did was tied to its bounded hands. And now it wielded Night Terror's cleave, using it on a terrifying scale. In one devastating motion, the center of the city transformed into a chaos of destruction. Debris and massive chunks of stone scattered everywhere. Water from the fountain flooding certain areas while people scrambled desperately to save themselves. Yet none of this affected the stability of the rift that stood before the fountain. Even when water thrashed against it, the liquid simply flowed through as though nothing existed there. The battle on the ground raged on, indifferent and negligent to the horrific level of disaster being wrought around it. Paragon Rizel lunged back at the monster, meeting it in a vicious clash. The Paragon threw blows with wicked speed, many landing on the devil and forcing it to stagger backward. Despite this barrage, his attacks yielded no visible results. The Paragon understood his position. Facing a Belial already exceeded his capabilities, let alone confronting a devilish Belial. His limit stopped at a catastrophic behemoth. Perhaps due to the nature of his ability, he could handle more. He could attempt fighting a devilish behemoth or even an abysmal one. But he couldn't predict the outcome. He might die, but at least he would take them with him. The air itself seemed to recoil as Paragon Rizel and the devilish Belial collided. Each strike Rizel unleashed was a symphony of devastation. Fists blurring into afterimages, shockwaves tearing through the earth like serrated teeth. Yet the creature moved, its charred body shifting with impossible grace, blackened joints bending backward, sideways, in ways that defied bone and sinew. Night Terror's 3 hands had become an inherent part of its body, burnt like the rest of its hideous form. The creature appeared to grow more accustomed to the hand with every fleeting second. Rizel's fist smashed into its chest with a thunderclap, cratering the ground beneath them, but the Belial's grin only widened, its jaw unhinging further, as if drinking in the violence like a man savoring fine wine. Crack, a sound like splitting stone. Rizel's eyes flicked down. The creature's clawed hand, Night Terror's former appendage, had speared through the space where his ribs had been a millisecond earlier. He twisted aside just enough, but the tip still grazed his side, slicing through it as though it were parchment. The Paragon lunged back, but the Belial pursued relentlessly, its limbs elongating like dark taffy, fingers stretching into jagged talons that raked the air. Each swipe left afterimages of darkness, trails of sinister black smoke that hissed and corroded the ground beneath them. Rizel's boot slammed down, anchoring his fixed point. The world warped around him as he launched forward, a comet of pure wrath. His elbow crashed into the creature's throat. Crunch. But the Belial's head merely lolled, neck bending like a snapped reed. Its free hand lashed out, palm slamming into Rizel's sternum. The paragon's breath exploded from his lungs. He skidded backward, heels carving deep trenches through tiled ground, but not fast enough. The Belial was already there, its body reassembling mid-leap, limbs snapping back into place with wet, popping sounds. All three arms rose like blackened branches, descending in a storm of obsidian spikes. Rizel weaved, his movements a blur of precision, but the creature anticipated him. A fist clipped his shoulder, and the impact resonated through his bones like a tuning fork. He staggered, and the Belial's maw yawned open, rows of teeth glinting. A guttural shriek erupted, not sound but pressure, a concentrated beam of distortion that vaporized the air in its path. The paragon crossed his arms, anchoring himself. The beam struck, causing the ground beneath him to vanish, reduced to a smoking canyon. But Rizel stood suspended, unharmed, his fixed point holding him aloft in the eye of the storm. Sweat dripped down his temple as he glared at the creature. He exhaled heavily and sighed. "Oh well, I think I have done enough test run." As he spoke, a silver and glittering armor began to form around his body, carried by crawling white sparks that raced across his skin, carving intricate paths for the armor to materialize. Standing suspended in the air was some sort of knight. His presence alone commanded the space around him. Polished silver armor gleamed beneath the pale light that managed to escape through the veil of darkness. Each plate was sculpted to perfection, a masterwork of both form and function. The armor clung to his powerful frame, layered in overlapping segments that whispered with the faintest motion, reflecting a haunting shimmer that spoke of both glory and inevitable ruin. Golden embellishments traced the edges of his armor, clawing like talons from the shoulders and wrists. Sharp, elegant, and regal. They caught the light like fire frozen in metal, framing his silhouette with a harsh, uncompromising aura. A white scarf wrapped around his neck, trailing down his chest in stark contrast to the armor's unyielding brilliance, fluttering as if disturbed by a ghostly breeze only he could feel. A flowing blue tabard spilled from his waist, hanging like a curtain of twilight against the harsh silver of his armor, rippling with every subtle movement. Beneath it, chainmail glinted from the shadows of his legs, each link meticulously woven to defend without hindering movement. His greaves were fashioned with sharp contours, forged to endure crushing blows while maintaining the deadly mobility of a predator stalking its prey. His helm was the epitome of dominance, sweeping back like the horns of a mythical beast, golden crests arcing upward from the sides, framing the narrow visor like the crown of a fallen monarch. Shadows veiled his face, rendering his features unknowable, an enigma wrapped in steel and resolute silence. In his hands he wielded two blades. Their darkened metal stood stark against the gleam of his armor, one a viciously long sword resting against his shoulder, the other strapped to his waist, still sleeping in its ornate scabbard. Their crossguards mirrored the golden accents of his armor, wickedly pointed and poised to strike. Despite the weight of his armaments, he stood with perfect poise, immovable as a mountain, like a sentinel from a bygone age, forever etched in the memory of those who dared to gaze upon his terrible splendor. Paragon Rizel glared down at the monster, a single orb of green light igniting in the dark depths of his visor. Come. Chapter 866. Energy Absorber. The devilish Belial's grin split wider, skin tearing at the corners like rotten parchment. Its stolen arm twitched, still slick with Rizel's blood. The paragon's new armor hummed, its gilded edges seeping wisps of kinetic light as the air itself crystallized around him. Rizel's visor blazed with wicked light as he dropped the sword from his shoulder, letting it ring hollowly across the silent battlefield. He unsheathed the second blade from his scabbard and cast it into the crater beneath. The air thickened, suspended in anticipation. Even the drifting wind held its breath. Then it began. Rizel didn't move, he unfolded. A silver streak across the battlefield, his armored fist already mid-arc. The Belial raised Night Terror's claw to block, but Rizel's speed doubled mid-swing, his velocity suddenly saturated with unnatural violence. The impact detonated like a newborn star, shearing the claw clean off in a fountain of black ichor. The severed limb liquefied midair, writhing back toward the Belial's body like a serpent seeking its nest. After the paragon's strike, the creature's grin faltered, the blood in its eyes burning fiercely. It lunged forward, lashing out with its remaining hands, fists blurring into a tempest of jagged black bone. Rizel stood motionless, welcoming the onslaught. Each strike thrummed against his armor, golden filigree brightening as kinetic energy funneled into his reservoirs. The ground beneath him cratered, yet his posture remained unwavering, a lighthouse drinking a hurricane. Rizel's talent was cunning and broken, revolving around the absorption of movement energy, both from his own movements and of those around him. This terrifying ability ensured he would never grow tired as long as he had essence. Of course, this was merely the main overview of his talent. His specific abilities were even more frightening. His vagrant talent ability, for instance, allowed him to channel absorbed kinetic energy to fortify his entire body's durability. As a paragon, with it Rizel's body possessed such resilience that he could walk through a cataclysmic explosion engulfing all of Lithia, with vicious shockwaves tearing everything asunder, and emerge unscathed, like a stone unmoved by raging waters. The ability was why he could fly within the tsunami of a catastrophic behemoth without concern. The green light in the paragon's visor flared with savage intensity. He dropped low and shot forward, unfolding again. His speed made the ground shriek and disintegrate in his wake. His fists clenched tight as he approached the monster. Upon impact, massive shockwaves fractured the earth beneath them, sending debris skyward. The devil lost its footing, staggering on the uneven terrain, but Paragon Rizel remained impossibly balanced, his hands shooting forward like twin cannons. Each strike rippled the abomination's charred skin with subtle shockwaves. Shallow cuts bloomed across the creature's hands as it attempted to block the paragon's assault. For a moment, the devil faltered, bewildered as any intelligent creature would be. The paragon threw punches that cut like razors, inflicting dual damage with each blow. The devil's skin quivered beneath the force of his strikes while simultaneously being sliced by their sharpness. Though the charred hide proved more durable than anything the paragon had previously faced, lesser monsters would have perished long ago. Paragon Rizel had anticipated such a battle. It explained why he had subdued all those destroyers single-handedly, absorbing vast amounts of kinetic energy throughout the process. Such abundant kinetic energy would prove invaluable now, though his attention constantly drifted to the giant hand dangling from the rift. A devilish Belial alone was worrisome enough. Unwilling to expose his precious mentee to such danger, he decided to handle this threat first. Afterward, everyone would need to unite against the Leviathan. Even then, he could only hope their combined strength would suffice. But first, he had to outlast this wicked, unnatural monster. He continued his relentless barrage, his fists shrouded in energy sharper than any blade. Each strike launched what felt like 1,000 spears at his opponent. The energy he had absorbed from previous battles fueled his assault, and his swift, precise movements were already gathering more. Beyond that, he subtly harvested energy from the movements of everyone around him. A faint aura of his essence manifestation had spread throughout the entire city, imposing his influence subtly over it all. The creature's eyes burned as it used all 3 arms to block the paragon's strikes. Its body rippled with each impact, generating shockwaves powerful enough to buckle and fracture the ground beneath them. It spread its grotesque wings wide and took flight, retreating backward without turning away from the paragon. But Rizel didn't hesitate for even a heartbeat. The instant he spotted the creature spreading its wings, a massive shockwave compressed beneath his legs and suddenly exploded. As the monster took flight, the paragon was already closing the distance, raining merciless blows upon it. They soared through the air, leaving shattered earth below. They crashed through an entire building, but Paragon Rizel remained unfazed. He seized the monster's neck, his grip like a vice of blades desperate to tear through the abomination's throat. Yet the neck beneath his fist resembled a pole of unyielding alloy that refused to give. He had never encountered anything like it. Clenching his grip tighter on its neck, he swung his hand and crushed the monster into the wooden wardrobe nearby. The furniture's back shattered with a violent blast of wind, and the wall immediately followed, shaking the entire building as it crumbled. Paragon Rizel pressed on relentlessly. He pulled the monster closer, his grip still a vice of blades hungry for flesh, and delivered another sharp blow to the creature's stomach. The impact made the creature's eyes bulge and forced black blood to erupt from its mouth. An explosion of wind blasted from its back, sweeping away everything within reach like leaves in a hurricane. Barely recovering from the pain, the monster lunged to grab the paragon, but its hands froze mid-flight, forcibly retreating. The paragon's eyes widened momentarily. Though uncertain why the monster halted its attack, he had cloaked himself in his most powerful durability energy and remained unperturbed. Then he witnessed something grotesque. The monster began tearing its stolen hands apart. It used each remaining hand to grip another and savagely ripped them from its main body. Thick black blood flowed freely, pooling at its feet like oil. A crooked grin slowly formed on the creature's devilish face. Chapter 867. Give me my hands back. Something was strange and different about the monster, but Paragon Rizel cared little about that. The only thing that mattered was shredding it apart, whatever it tried to do. His hand never left the creature's neck, even as it tore its borrowed hands away. Paragon Rizel escalated the damage. He conjured a terrifying shockwave just above the creature, causing the air to release its crushing weight. The ground caved beneath them, the monster sinking as if pounded by an invisible hammer. The paragon then unleashed his ephemeral ability, which elevated his movements beyond the laws of physics. He needed no momentum buildup to generate devastating force. All he needed was to swing. When he added his vagrant ability to the mix, he increased the speed of his attack with each subsequent strike. He built momentum with every consequent blow, not from zero but from what seemed like peak human potential, shattering limits with each movement. Like a storm gathering strength until it became a hurricane. Each blow exploded with torrents of wind that blasted through walls, crumbling them to dust. He pinned the monster in place, preventing it from escaping while continuously inflicting damage. All with an unsettling green light blazing in the dark depths of his visor. The creature finally managed to wrench away the Rebellua borrowed hand but remained trapped in the paragon's blade fist, its neck caught in that cutting chokehold. Yet that crooked grin somehow remained frozen on its devilish face, subtly unsettling the paragon. Rizel strengthened his fist and pushed it closer, raising his hand to crush the creature's eyes. But at that moment, something felt wrong. He frowned and slowly turned to his right side. The hand he had raised was no more. Confusion darkened his eyes beneath the helmet. He glared, and the green light of his visor burned with vicious intensity. The monster now wore his hand. On its left was a blackened, charred hand, the last remaining of the three it had stolen. On its right side was the paragon's own hand. The creature looked unnatural with an alabaster-skinned hand merged to its blackened, charred body. It resembled a grotesque tapestry created by some cursed and forsaken weaver, human flesh and monstrous form intertwined in an unholy union. The devilish monster grinned wider and moved its alabaster hand, seizing hold of the paragon's armored own. For the first time in his life, Paragon Rizel felt what it was like to be at the receiving end of the unforgiving and grueling cut of his own hand. He had coated his entire body in momentum that charged his durability. But the sharpness of his fist had also been derived from that same momentum. When the creature clutched his hand, a sharp, cruel pain lanced through bone and muscle, forcing him to stifle a groan. Crimson blood surged out as he yanked his fist back and staggered away, his single remaining hand hanging limp. He studied the monster's hand. The creature obviously hadn't torn his hand off. It had somehow absorbed it without the armored part. And his own right side looked as if it had never had a hand to begin with, leaving no space for it in the armor. Rizel knew certain things about the powers these higher monsters wielded. The truth was that just like humans, every monster possessed unique talents. In lower ranks, these talents remained dormant, In higher ranks they became active. The higher the rank, the more pronounced these abilities became. A behemoth wielded power equal to that of a paragon, able to bend nature to a certain extent. What then could a Belial do, let alone a devilish one? A creature that lurked far closer to the depths of all wrongness, lacking only one step from reaching the bottom of darkness. Rewriting concept? Rizel refused to believe it, except the truth lay bare before his eyes. The only explanation was that the concept of his hand had been rewritten, transferred to the creature as though Rizel had never possessed it. That would be terrifying. Indeed it would be, if his suspicions proved true. Actually, they were, so it already was terrifying. But there had to be a limit to what it could do. I suspect that using Breakneck Edge is the best it can manage. Breakneck Edge was the ability that allowed him to render his fist lethally sharp. Paragon Rizel suspected the monster could probably use only this ability because that was what the hand had access to. It was impossible for it to harness all of his talents. Copying a person's talent was an inconceivable concept, because each talent was deeply rooted to the cores. Unless one could extract and absorb the essence of cores, they couldn't copy talents. And even if they somehow managed to copy talents, they would need to be coreless to absorb the essence of cores. Another impossibility, since a coreless person would be no different from a mundane human. This knowledge formed the foundation of the laws that dictated the flow of the world. An unbendable rule. So Rizel was sure. The creature grinned ominously, opening and closing its fingers as it tested the stolen hand, like a musician becoming acquainted with a new instrument before a deadly performance. Paragon Rizel observed the creature, preparing to unleash his full power. He had hesitated because he still needed to confront the Leviathan. Though he possessed vast reserves of essence as a paragon, they weren't infinite. Using essence manifestation drained his reserves at an alarming rate, and he desperately hoped to avoid reaching that state. Yet he had to continue fighting somehow. His only remaining hand was seriously injured and bleeding. He could barely control his wrist. But at the very least, he maintained a fragile command over the hand, no matter how damaged it was. We'll make something work with it. The devilish Belial had already begun marching toward Paragon Rizel, its long legs and flat webbed feet crushing scattered with splinters with casual disregard. Then it suddenly stopped. The creature's ugly face contorted into an expression of horror and disdain as it slowly turned its gaze downward. A black, lustrous hand had erupted from the flaming darkness below, clutching the monster's leg with unrelenting force, refusing to release its grip. Chapter 868. The Rage of Losing. Northern flew through the battlefield like a trail of mist, imperceptible to many, even his own allies. But wherever he flew, his enemies faltered and his allies found respite. His allies, in this sense, were none other than his summons. Black Mamba blistered through monsters, leaping from place to place with astonishing speed. Northern did not know how the summon had managed to grow 2 additional hands, but Black Mamba seemed desperate and on the brink of a new discovery. More than seeing the look in Black Mamba's forlorn eyes, Northern could resonate with the emotion thanks to Link. He sensed what they were all feeling. Some emotions, of course, registered more vividly than others. Black Mamba's, for instance. Northern tried not to dwell on it, instead weaving his illusioned blade like strokes of paint, coloring the sky with a horrifying palette of devastation. He landed on the edge of a building. The following minute, someone crashed into the structure, rolling away. Behind them, a clone of Northern appeared and halted their gruesome momentum, helping the person to their feet. Then Northern walked toward them. Jessie. Jessie bowed her head. I'm sorry to be a bother to you. Northern frowned. Come on, stop that. A burden to me? Black sparks wove around his free hand as he spoke to her. You are not a burden to me. In fact, your growth is amazing. You're not even a sage yet and you're already dealing with behemoths. That's one hell of an achievement, Jessie. Her sleep-deprived eyes widened momentarily, her cheeks flushing slightly. Then she lowered her gaze with a subtle smile. Thank you, Master. Don't mention it. Take. Jessie raised her head as Northern spoke. She looked at his hand with a confused expression. He extended a round shield adorned with several eyes. She studied it strangely as she received it from Northern, listening to his voice. "It's yours now." Jessai's eyes widened. "Master, you don't have to. It's not really useful to me. Check it out. It should serve you well." He smiled and patted her head before leaping back into battle. With a single bound, he shattered the flat surface of the roof and vanished into the chaos. Jessai, meanwhile, stood transfixed for a minute, studying the components of the shield. It was, of course, plates of 1,000 eyes, which Northern had received after defeating the 10th floor boss of the dungeon, the one that had stubbornly refused to die. It possessed orders like Watchful Gaze, which allowed its user to detect attack patterns. Northern could already do that with Chaos Eyes. Glimpse allowed the shield to cast a bright red light to momentarily blind opponents. Northern had no need for that either. And Bloodthirst allowed the shield to release a pressuring amount of bloodlust. Yet whatever the shield could unleash paled in comparison to the bloodlust buried in the depths of Northern's hollow heart. Speaking of Northern, he already soared through the battlefield. But with a different weapon. "It's been a while since I used Granger." The twin-bladed staff twirled in his hands, its curved blades like scythes of death, rolling and twirling in the air as he spun the weapon swiftly. He shifted from left to right, ruthlessly tearing through the wings of these abominations. Time and again, Granger proved itself to be his most fearsome weapon. Northern felt an unusual resonance with it, as if things became much simpler when it was in his grasp. The only challenge was his personal preference. He genuinely preferred and enjoyed the sword. That didn't mean he lacked skill with the twin-bladed staff. Even while in motion, in flight, he spun the weapon over his body, carrying the centrifugal force with his entire form. He delivered speedy consecutive strikes that were nearly impossible to follow and too swift to counter, never sacrificing their devastating power. He rolled the staff in his hands, ascending slightly to gather momentum. As he descended, he returned with a powerful downward swing onto the back of an abomination, sending it crashing into the ground. A thunderous sound rolled through the entire area, the city trembling as the creature collided with the earth and carved a massive crater between buildings. He swung Granger back, burying its scythe blade into the neck of a monster lunging at him from behind. His cold eyes gleamed beneath his helmet, causing the blue flames of all 4 eyes of his armor to burn with wicked intensity. With one full forward swing, he severed the creature's neck, carrying it forward with the force of his attack before flinging it away. Of course, Northern's attacks weren't merely physical strikes. Each was laced with echo and return, multiplying the attack itself while unleashing a torrent of impact on the same point. His attacks, no matter how simple they appeared, consistently combined the abilities of full impact and phantasmal strike with the help of DIY, yielding devastatingly destructive results. He shot forward with blinding speed but suddenly halted, his gaze drawn to a distant building to his right, where he had witnessed Paragon Rizel and the devilish Belial crash moments ago. "I don't remember ever summoning him." Night Terror was tearing through the gate of limitless void by himself. Few could accomplish such a feat, just Byran and Revant. The others needed Northern to summon them. That was why they were called summons, after all. But suddenly, Northern felt a spike of emotion. Anger, rage, a red-hot, burning fury erupting from one of his summons. This rage burned even more vividly than whatever emotion Black Mamba had right in that moment. Of course, getting his hands stolen must have ignited something intense and desperate within Night Terror, compelling the devil himself to forge a pathway out of the limitless void. It was both wrong and astonishing simultaneously. Tearing through the limitless void was like ripping apart the fabric of reality itself. It was far easier for Northern to simply tear the veil for them. However, the summon was desperately pushing through with his own will alone, raging fueling every bit of his black lustrous fiber. And it didn't stop there. Something was changing about Night Terror. Something was evolving. Chapter 869. No more holding back. Northern frowned slightly. He was uncertain about the disturbing flame burning in the depths of Night Terror's being. This seemed unprecedented. At first, he considered that Night Terror might be evolving his void rank. That wouldn't be concerning. But void rank evolutions happen naturally, and Northern always somehow knew when they occurred. It had never been this dramatic. This was as if something was being born in the depth of Night Terror's soul. Something evil and vile. As Northern watched, the building shook violently and its side walls exploded, ejecting the charred devil. Immediately, two figures followed. One a glossy black, the other a shining silver. Each collided with the monster in a ferocious whirlwind of force, unleashing hellish blows upon the creature. But the creature matched their combined speed, blocking their blows so swiftly that its hands blurred into wind. A nasty grin sat comfortably on its face, eternally taunting them. Night Terror and Paragon Rizel had teamed up to confront the monster, but the situation remained precarious. Not entirely unchanged, though the pressure would ease on Paragon Rizel, allowing him to conserve power for the Leviathan. Should I join them? Northern considered it briefly but dismissed the idea. He understood that Paragon Rizel had asked him to stay back not just for his safety, but because they weren't certain if only one Belial would emerge. His expression darkened with sudden realization. If more of that vile thing appear, it would be catastrophic. He sighed and gripped Grenger tighter before diving toward a behemoth, giving Linus and Shard Creeper trouble. The creature seemed remarkably resistant to the goat's memory illusions. Moreover, it was already establishing a relationship with the wind. TSK. The longer these creatures remained outside, the greater the danger. Inside the rift, behemoths couldn't learn their relationship with the world. They were contained in a cubicle that followed forged principles. But the moment they stepped beyond that boundary, they began to learn continuously, their mentality evolving. This was deeply troubling. Currently, the behemoths couldn't perform something as significant as essence manifestation, but it was only a matter of time before they mastered it. Northern needed to eliminate them all before that became possible. Furthermore, he worried about Paragon Rizel and what was happening to the Belial as it continued to exist outside the rift. I never imagined battling monsters outside the rift would be more dangerous than inside it. Who would have thought that the place he considered hell was actually a devised safe haven, protecting the world from the monster's ruthlessness? No wonder rifts were meant to be challenged and defeated before they shattered into reality, disgorging monsters into the world. Northern collided with the monster, tearing it downward away from the two of them. With slight strain, he raised Grenger and began to drive one end of its curved blade into the back of the monster, while grabbing one of its wings to displace its balance. The monster succumbed to the force of falling, its equilibrium lost. Beyond that, it had to contend with an impact that wrenched its very being to the core, crushing its impenetrable skin with relentless, persistent force. Cracks began to appear on its hide. But the wind subtly responded, assisting the creature in such a way that its reckless descent was being cushioned. Though it should have plummeted into the ground moments ago, it still swayed in the night wind's embrace. Northern noticed this, though somewhat late. He grimaced behind the vicious eyes of the Night Terror armor and dug his clawed, armored hands deeper. Although he still couldn't scratch the creature's skin, his grip tightened, allowing him to apply greater force, as if he meant to tear the wings from their roots. He needed to position himself to use Grenger to... He paused his thoughts. All right, hell. Northern closed his eyes briefly, absorbing everything within his spatial awareness. Not a single thing moved in the air that escaped his notice. He promised himself he was not going to care any more about it. He would just unleash the full extent of his abilities. And yet he found himself thinking methodically in moments like these, finding a subtle way to deal with the situation. It had to stop now. He sighed and exhaled cold, smoky air from the overlapping plates around his helmet's mouth region. His lips beneath the armor turned frigid white, slowly cracking as if diseased by frost. Patches of ice spread across his armor. The air followed, its temperature plummeting rapidly. Northern summons were somewhat resistant to extreme temperatures, so their movements remained largely unhindered by the strange phenomenon taking place. But Linus found himself unable to fly as usual. Frost spread over his glass wings, forcing him to slow. As the wings began to crack, he managed to find a roof and crash onto it moments before they shattered completely. Jessie had also landed quickly the instant she felt her entire body tremble from the frigid cold assaulting the air. Linus had crashed on the same roof where she had gained solid footing. He stood, his silver helm unfolding to reveal his face. He wore a dark, enraged frown. "What the hell is that bastard doing again? Mind how you address my master." Jessie stood eye to eye with him, her gaze blazing with twisted, malevolent intensity. His burned with ruthless indignation. He sighed and looked away. When it came to matters concerning Northern, they were like cats and dogs. Jessie despised the way Linus regarded him. Yet somehow, the two had developed a strange, twisted battle bond because of it. Their gazes shifted from each other to the center of the suddenly white wind. The air had transformed, as if an evil, sentient blizzard had descended upon the upper reaches of the city alone, claiming everything there as its territory. Of course, they both understood that no one else could be the architect of this insane level of attack except Northern. It somewhat failed to surprise them, yet simultaneously did. Realizing he still possessed such an ability was quite chilling. More so than the cold that assaulted them. Northern, meanwhile, on the back of the still resisting behemoth, muttered, "I guess this is the first time I'm using another ability of Frostheart aside from ice manipulation." He paused and breathed. Absolute Zero. Chapter 870. Absolute Zero. The battlefield froze. A hollow, cold wind howled across the upper reaches of Lithia. The entire place felt like a colossal frost giant stirring from ancient slumber. The howling burrowed into the fabric of night itself, piercing and raw. More than just announcing the arrival of a frost nightmare, it heralded something primal. The entire world seemed to pause. No, it did pause. The white blizzard intensified, veiling the sky in absolute white. The night didn't break into day, yet the city gained momentary respite from the oppressive darkness that had blanketed the sky at a point of the rift's appearance. Everything beyond vanished into whiteness. Not quite frozen, rather sheathed in vicious wind painted white. Everything within its grasp became invisible. Everyone, including Ascendant Zion and every other drifter working to evacuate the merchants, stared skyward in a daze. Their faces drained of color, eyes wide with terror at the strange blizzard engulfing the sky above. They couldn't comprehend what it was or what it did, beyond recognizing it as the source of the sudden chill that made their bodies tremble. However, in that white expanse, time itself ceased to exist. It shattered like thin spring ice. Space crumbled under the stillness of frost. Everything caught in its embrace felt their souls hitch with cold. This hitch, too, had shattered along with broken time, fracturing like ice beneath a heavy step. In a single moment, with the terrifying power of a sage, manifested through an essence of primordial darkness, an impossible concept etched itself into reality. The effect of this ability would linger in this area of the Central Plains for years to come. The white cloak in the sky slowly dissipated, scattering like crystal mist, flowing away to find its rest. Northern looked around before sighing and finally descending. The behemoth beneath him dissolved into ice crystals. His feet touched the ground softly. Lithia had fallen eerily quiet. People stared at him with myriad expressions. Terrified, amazed, ensnared, hopeful, scared, joyful. Kaleidoscope of gazes. He nearly wilted beneath their collective scrutiny. Fortunately, a thunderous crash shattered the silence, causing the ground to vibrate so violently that Northern felt it reverberate through his heart. He frowned and launched himself skyward, swiftly piercing through remnant cold winds to land atop a building overlooking the area where night terror, burning storm, and the devilish Belial remained locked in their heart-stopping battle. His summons dropped behind him, Black Mamba's eyes glowing with white light. Light of Featherstone landed gently beside him, white cloak flowing like a river through the cold wind. Others began to arrive, each landing with a soft quake upon the building's roof. Jessie and Linus were the last to join him, all focused on the frightening battle below. its devastating impact reshaping the environment with each thunderous clash. Northern was about to move. Together, they could bring the Belial faster to its end. Stop it from relating with the environment and growing stronger. However, he did not get to take that step. Instead, his eyes widened beneath his armor, causing the 4 blue flames of his helm to flare fiercely as he whipped his head back toward the sky. Jessie looked at him strangely and asked with a slight tilt of her head, "Is something wrong, sir?" Linus also frowned, studying Northern's sudden alertness. Northern paused, his helm unfolding to the neck, leaving 2 glossy sinister horns protruding from his head. He examined all of them with a subtle frown etched across his face. None of them were feeling it. There was a pressure in the air, subtle but perilously dangerous. Something equally sinister to what the Belial had emanated when it clawed to tear through the rift. But the disturbing thing was that earlier pressure had been one everyone instantly reacted to. This one, however, was not registering with them at all. There were only 2 cases where one could not detect such a terrifying pressure. Either the pressure was not powerful enough, mundane and casual, able to slip past the keen senses of these formidable creatures behind him, or the pressure was too powerful, overwhelmingly so, and far beyond the capability of their perception. They couldn't see it coming. They could never see it coming. The fact that he alone could feel this dangerous shift in the air pointed to the latter, which also meant the approaching monster was definitely stronger than the One Night Terror and Paragon Rizel were currently fighting. Northern looked at all of them, his azure eyes burning with authority. "All of you find ways to support Paragon Rizel. I will take care of this alone." Jessie fell to her knees. "Master, please let me." Northern interrupted her. "If this was something any of you could handle, I wouldn't hesitate to send you right into it. I almost lost you all in the dungeon because of my decision. I won't repeat that mistake. This time, watch me and learn. Understand the reason why you've chosen to serve me, and reinforce it in your mind." His gaze drifted to Linus at the latter end of his statement. Then he exhaled steadily and turned away from them, walking forward. Northern's mind entered overdrive the moment he turned away. Something was terribly wrong with this pressure. He could feel it with every fiber of his being but couldn't quite grasp its nature. He almost questioned his own perception. After all, despite being amazingly powerful because of the influence of void and chaos, he was still only a sage. There existed monsters that could diminish his heightened awareness. He simply hadn't encountered them before. Now, noting how none of the others had detected the monster's presence, he grew extremely wary. Northern was walking forward when his eyes suddenly widened. But it was too late. He knew it was too late. Curved, sharp black claws materialized before his eyes, aiming to gouge out one of his eyeballs. The sequence happened so fast that even if he threw himself backward, the clawed hand would have seized his eye before he could escape. However, to Northern's shock, the hand froze mid-movement. His heart hammered in his chest. Beads of sweat formed on his face as his shoulders trembled with relief at his deliverance from the crude fangs of death, this time more real and visceral than any other brush with mortality he'd experienced. In that frozen instant, he vanished from sight, reappearing 3 meters back. His eyes widened again at what he saw. Black Mamba? He couldn't believe his eyes. Chapter 871. Evolution of 2 Void Quiddities. For anything to stop the hand, they must have sensed its presence earlier and pinpointed its exact location. Black Mamba possessed the overwhelming potential to outpace anything in speed. But Northern had believed it couldn't perceive the monster. He was certain none of them could. Yet perhaps Black Mamba actually managed to detect it belatedly, in that fleeting moment when he was racking his brain to decipher what felt wrong. This event alone left Northern utterly astonished by Black Mamba. With the strange emotions swelling within the summoned soul, he knew something significant was unfolding. The exact nature had just remained elusive. The next second revealed all. His breath caught in his throat as a new panel materialized before his eyes, delivering unprecedented news. 2 news, actually. The first one read, "Your summon, Black Mamba, is evolving. Chaos and void is losing grip of the creature's soul. Due to your summon's affinity to formlessness, Omniform is planting root in its soul. Black Mamba's dark and meaningless soul is gaining meaning, searching for the true drive of growth, the reason for existence and its comprehension. Black Mamba had come closer to the crux of that realization, and such realization is fueling its resolve to push beyond its limit. With a nebulous passion to rend asunder every creature that crosses its master's path, and the unreasonably stalwart resolve and stubbornness of the strange serpentine creature Black Mamba, your summon is evolving to a new being. Northern's brow furrowed, deep lines etching across his forehead. Instantly, the entire environment erupted in sinister black smoke that devoured everything like a ravenous storm unleashed from the void itself. But he couldn't focus fully on the catastrophe unfolding before him. Another strange panel appeared, delivering additional extraordinary information. Your summon, Night Terror, out of the humiliation of having his hands stolen, derived from its strange and tyrannical pride, had discovered a new height of power. Unwritten is taking root in its soul, unwriting and rewriting that which should have been normal. Night Terror is evolving. A new soul core is being formed. A new soul core is being formed? That aspect troubled Northern most profoundly. According to everything he understood about monsters, they simply couldn't ascend to an entirely new rank. Evolving to a higher danger level wasn't unusual. He had wondered when Night Terror would transform into an abysmal hellion, as it had remained a devilish hellion for quite some time. Even as a devilish hellion, it towered over others of its class, 100 times more fearsome and ferocious than any monster of similar caliber. Suddenly seeing that it was evolving was quite exhilarating. Northern, though, was forced to redirect his attention to the disaster being wrought by Black Mamba's evolution. He raised his hand over his face as the terrible storm of black smoke intensified, swirling like a cyclone of midnight ink. Black Mamba and the strange creature remained locked in place, the enigmatic summon refusing to relinquish its grip, despite the transformation unfolding and refolding its entire soul. Unable to discern exactly what was happening to Black Mamba, Northern opened his chaos eyes. 2 blue eyeballs separated within each of his eyes and moved closer together, focusing to pierce through the dark tempest. Black Mamba's skin began peeling away in gossamer sheets. Beneath, a glossy new layer of obsidian skin emerged, accentuating the creature's musculature with an almost artistic precision, more magnificent than before. It appeared as if the creature had been sculpted from the essence of midnight itself, then polished to perfection, every contour of its body refined and defined. The white lines that typically coursed across its entire form, perpetually reshaping to suit its momentary needs of strength or speed, had vanished completely. In their place, 2 small horns jutted from each side of its head, curved and lethal. Its eyes remained their characteristic white, but now gleamed with crystalline brilliance, no less dangerous for their beauty. A small crystal formed at the center of its torso, pulsing with inner light. As the crystal completed its formation, another panel materialized before Northern's eyes. Congratulations! Your summon, Black Mamba, has gained the meaning of soul and gained 6 soul cores for its nebulous nature. Your summon had become a strange existence, his source and origin tied to the void, but his soul broke beyond that prison and found meaning in reality, hence making it a void monster, the first of its kind to ever exist. Black Mamba has evolved to Apex Destroyer, Nebulous Lord. The dark storm scattered with ferocious force, compelling Northern to shield his face with his arms while those behind him sought whatever protection they could muster. As the tempest cleared, Black Mamba stood fully revealed, transformed. Now taller and distinctly different, its pure glossy black form contrasted sharply with wickedly shining white crystalline eyes. It retained no features for a mouth. This hadn't changed, as Black Mamba had always manifested a lip line only when it wished to speak or smile. Its frame had become sleeker, more streamlined, yet the flowing contours of its muscles suggested even more tremendous strength than before, coiled power waiting to be unleashed. Northern's moment of admiration was interrupted by yet another panel materializing before him. Unwritten has rewritten the normalcy for your summon. Night Terror's soul rank has evolved. Night Terror's danger level has evolved. Devilish Hellion Night Terror has evolved to Abysmal Maelstrom, Abyss Tyrant. Abyss Tyrant. Northern immediately sensed something unusual about the name. Both the Abyss and Tyrant elements struck him as significant departures. It seems whatever happened to Night Terror should not be considered ordinary. Or should I call it Abyss Tyrant now? The new name would certainly require some time for adjustment. His gaze shifted to where the creature was rising. Oh! Night Terror, now Abyss Tyrant, bore skin remarkably similar to Black Mamba's, or rather Nebulous Lord's. Yes, it's definitely going to take some time. Abyss Tyrant's midnight black skin glistened like polished onyx beneath the subdued glow of an eldritch light, undulating subtly as if darkness itself pulsed beneath the surface. Ivory lines etched intricate patterns across its muscled form, branching like ancient veins that throbbed with spectral energy. These markings ran vertically along its torso, snaking outward across broad shoulders before diverging down its four powerful arms. Each limb a mesmerizing tapestry of stark contrast between the obsidian flesh and alabaster markings. Its head now resembled a polished skull, devoid of distinguishable features save for empty, abyssal eye sockets, twin voids that consumed light and emitted a faint, haunting resonance. Jagged, claw-like fingers, elongated and curved, gleamed with an otherworldly sheen. Their tips stained a deeper shade, as though dipped in the essence of despair itself. Each tapered into a razor-thin edge that could cleave through bone with terrifying ease. A dark, flowing skirt draped from its waist, layered with segmented plates of silver that caught what little light remained, shimmering like fragments of captured moonlight. The fabric itself seemed to devour illumination, creating an ethereal contrast to its ink-black form. A staff, slender yet imposing, crowned with a crescent shape, rested in one clawed hand, its shaft intricately etched with serpentine designs mirroring the patterns adorning its body. The creature bore itself with regal poise, its presence so overwhelming that space itself appeared to warp around it. Northern could only gape in awe. Night Terror had transformed into an abysmal maelstrom, Abyss Tyrant, while Black Mamba had become a void monster, first of its kind, an apex destroyer, Nebulous Lord. By conventional classification, this meant the Nebulous Lord now ranked as the more powerful entity. But why do I keep feeling like Night Terror, Abyss Tyrant, is stronger? The sensation defied easy explanation. Perhaps it wasn't a question of superior strength, but rather equal might manifested differently. This won't do. I need to see the profiles myself. Chapter 872. The Abyss Tyrant. Name: Abyss Tyrant. True name: Abyss Singularity. Danger level: Abysmal. Void rank: Emanation. Void ability: Void Flames. Void Cleave. Attributes: Absolute Silence. Fourfold Cognizance. Core nature: Hollow Star. Core abilities: Severance, Fractured Invocation, Litany of the Final Rite, Black Bloom, the Staff of the Forsaken Crescent. Northern narrowed his eyes for a moment. Wow, quite a lot. At this moment, both battlefields around him had delved into a cacophony of ugly metallic sounds. He didn't care though. More than watching how the battle was unfolding, Northern was desperately curious about what despicable abilities his Void Summon now had. Abyss Tyrant now had extra abilities aside from the abilities it had thanks to Void. It seemed that its core had gained a nature and also some certain abilities. Northern squinted his eyes for a moment, massaging his chins. Could this core nature have something to do with how monsters relate to their environment at higher rank? Of course, he wasn't so sure, but he smelled that he was right. It had always been strange that he couldn't see what exactly was the talent in monsters. But this felt like a connector that pieced everything together. Whatever this abyss is, I'm sure it must be very dangerous. It even affected his true name too. Northern was slightly concerned because he was dealing with a concept he had never heard of or seen before. But he calmed himself and inspected the rest of the abilities. Absolute Silence. The air around the Abyss Tyrant is devoid of sound. Voices falter. Spell chants fail. Communication breaks down in its presence. This isn't just the absence of noise. It's the muting of energy, the collapse of vibration. It induces a kind of spiritual claustrophobia. Fourfold cognizance. Each pair of the Abyss Tyrant arms represents a different aspect of awareness. Physical, emotional, dimensional, and metaphysical. It perceives your soul's weight, your future's divergence, your lies, and your hidden intentions. Northern paused, studying each of the ability with a delighted expression glued to his face, while his entire surrounding bent and cracked with fearsome and terrifying sounds and vibrations. He moved on to the core's nature. Abyss Tyrant now had 5 cores, so Northern guessed that all 5 abilities were each belonging to one core. That would mean that since monsters were wired to not be able to evolve, the number of abilities they had was usually the number of cores they possess. That makes sense, but many of them don't use it. Northern had encountered very few that could. Either their abilities wasn't mature enough to be used or they weren't intelligent enough to use it. Well, if I can take account of the fact that most of the monsters I've met are in Rift, and Rift sort of limits their growth, I guess the explanation could add up. These days, the monsters he had been meeting have been proving to be rather smart and powerful than expected. All because they've spent longer time outside the Rift. He exhaled and continued to study the runes of Abyss Tyrant's abilities. Severance. The Abyss Tyrant claws can sever not only flesh, but purpose. If it marks someone, that person loses the reason behind their abilities. Swords grow dull in their hands, talents become foreign, instincts erode. It's not death, it's deactivation. Fractured invocation. Abyss Tyrant splits into 4 afterimages, each one representing a different aspect of its cognizance. Each illusion mimics an arms function, attacking from multiple angles. Litany of the Final Rite. A ritualistic ability. If left uninterrupted, it can erase a being entirely from existence, memories of them, impact they made, even the consequences of their actions. The world reshapes itself as though they were never born. Black Bloom. Abyss Tyrant summons a black flower blossoming in reverse. Anything caught within ages, rusts, forgets its function, and decays. Name. The Staff of the Forsaken Crescent. Rank. Ancient. Type. Bound weapon. Order. 3. Abilities. Reality Edict. Crescent Sundering. Staff of Origin. Description. A tall, obsidian and silver staff crowned by a crescent halo that spins silently. In the crescent's void is a shimmering ring, like a slow-turning eclipse locked in mid-phase. The staff appears ceremonial, yet it's inscribed with ancient, shifting runes that rewrite themselves based on the user's intention. It was a gift from a fallen star to the beautiful lady that was lost in the moon. Northern was left awed. He was not even going to talk about the fact that all of Abyss Tyrant's abilities are somewhat broken and too strong for a monster of its caliber. But its 5th ability was a bound item just like Granger. But Granger could not come close. Damn, he's so lucky. For a moment, Northern found himself wishing he could use the weapon, but it was bound. Wait. My clones use Granger though. Northern felt like he got his answer immediately he raised the thought. At the same time, he didn't want to believe it was completely impossible. Let's see what it can do first. Reality Edict. By planting the staff into the ground, it declares a temporary law in the area. Examples. Nothing may die. All within the radius become immortal but cannot heal. No spell may persist. Spells instantly dissipate. The slowest shall strike first. Reverses initiative speed orders in battle. These laws only last for a limited time but come at a cost, usually in the form of entropy, decay, or sacrificing one of its arms temporarily. Crescent Sundering. The crescent rotates and generates a beam of destructive effect. The effect usually differs according to the rotation corner of the crescent. Staff of Origin. At a point in time all thing will be as it ought to be, or has it always been? The four-faced man had nowhere to turn to, for he sees all corners already. Northern frowned at the last description then hissed. It was like an incomplete note and reminded him somewhat of the early description of chaos and void. That description only invited trouble, so he was going to just pretend like it didn't exist. Although that would no doubt be difficult. Northern shifted his gaze to all other abilities, his eyes gleaming deliciously. Wow! Even Staff's abilities are broken. He shook his head, smiling sweetly. All right, Nebulous Lord's turn. Chapter 873, Nebulous Lord. Paragon Rizel couldn't fathom what had gone wrong. Why the strange monster that had been such an ally had suddenly frozen. Something unusual was clearly happening to the creature. Not one to waste precious moments, he continued battling the devilish Belial single-handedly, while noting the approach of another entity. One that seemed more threatening. His momentary distraction cost him dearly. He tumbled to the ground from a blow of his own hand, stolen by the devilish Belial. Recovering swiftly, he stood and managed to withstand the devil's next barrage of heavy blows with his self-generated durability. Concerned about depleting his essence, Burning Storm began intentionally reducing his protective shield of durability, absorbing the lighter impacts if it meant conserving his soul essence. At least until the monster rejoined the fray. And that moment arrived sooner than expected. Abyss Tyrant plunged into the battle with such menacing force that the Paragon froze, a chill spreading through his body as he witnessed what had entered the conflict. This was an entirely different monster. The four eyes had vanished. The horns too were gone. That vile, devilish malice once radiating from the creature had disappeared. In its place stood something diabolical, yet in a subtle way respectful, controlled, almost dignified. A being that existed just beyond the edge of comprehension. Fear gripped Burning Storm like a winter frost, rendering him motionless for a heartbeat. Fortunately, he wasn't alone in his paralysis. The creature they both faced rose from the impact of Abyss Tyrant's entrance. When it laid eyes upon the tyrant, its entire body locked in place, its frame quivering slightly as its round eyes widened and visibly paled, despite its burnt skin. Both opponents stood transfixed by the inexplicable presence before them. Meanwhile, Northern was already advancing to the next phase of his new boon. A smile crossed his lips as Nebulous Lord's profile information materialized before his eyes. Monster profile. Name: Nebulous Lord. True name: unattained. Rank: Destroyer. Danger level: Apex. Void rank: Veil. Void abilities: nil. Attributes: formless. Core abilities: omniform. Northern brushed his chin, slightly confused. Nebulous Lord was now a destroyer, so by conventional standards, he should possess 6 abilities. Yet he had only 1. Maybe Night Terror is just different. But he seems to be taking after me a lot. What's happening here? Northern exhaled and summoned the information for Nebulous Lord's core abilities. Omniform. After studying his master for so long, a strange void-formed creature had gained true emotion and understanding of essence, breaking its prison of illusionary existence. He immediately ascended to become the pinnacle and first of its kind, towering above everything that dared to challenge it, making it an apex creature. A creature that rules over the body and power of anything and everything it consumes. Northern tilted his head slightly. A wellspring of joy bubbled in his belly, but he reread the description to ensure he understood correctly. If I'm right, Black Mamba, Nebulous Lord, rules over the power and body of all it consumes. Does that mean it can create summons too? Northern shook his head. That couldn't be right. It was simply impossible to have 2 masters under the same army. Moreover, the rune that transcribed consumed meant literal eating. This meant Nebulous Lord would devour them and become lord over their body and powers. The closest thing Northern could imagine, which aligned with Nebulous Lord's former ability to change form and its tendency toward formlessness, was he can become whoever he consumes, just like how he could become whatever name he absorbed. This realization sent a cold thrill of excitement through Northern. He understood there would be limitations. But the ability to transform into anything beneath a destroyer rank was already terrifying enough. What Northern didn't know was whether it would work against humans. But he was eager to find out. The entire land trembled violently, pulling Northern's gaze from the panel to the aerial battle. Now that I'm done, I should rejoin. He glanced toward the Abyss Tyrant, and what he saw drew a pale smile from his lips. Paragon Rizel stood to one side while the Abyss Tyrant single-handedly plummeted the devilish Belial, brutally pounding it with all four hands. The crescent staff stood planted in the ground, casting a dark circle that confined both the Belial and Abyss Tyrant within its boundary. The Belial received crushing, devastating blows, the source of the earth-shaking tremors. The ground spewed its contents with each thunderous impact from Abyss Tyrant's assault. Northern slowly turned away like an ancient and creaking gate. I guess he doesn't need my help. Or anyone's. The nebulous lord, however, appeared to struggle somewhat. It was an abysmal Belial, after all. Northern's gaze hardened. He crouched to gather momentum before launching into the sky. The creature that Nebulous Lord battled resembled the other one, though with a darker, more lustrous shade of black. It didn't look entirely burnt. Rather, its dark body seemed inky and vaguely starlit. Its eyes and other features matched the first Belial. All its hands had merged as if they were never meant to exist separately. But unlike the devilish Belial's two hands, this one possessed four. Northern studied those hands with newfound attention. He hadn't done so before, lacking the opportunity until now. Now that he observed them, he couldn't ignore their ominous nature. He frowned darkly as he soared toward the maelstrom of combat. The terrifying clash between the two entities generated a shockwave that hung in the air like a wall, preventing anything from passing through. But Northern and anything were two different concepts entirely. With blistering speed, Northern tore into the shockwave barrier, shattering it with a hollow, resonant boom that rippled through the air. As if anticipating his master's intentions, Nebulous Lord quickly disengaged from the monster, shooting clear of the path. Northern slammed directly into the creature, propelling it upward with ferocious velocity. As Northern drove the creature higher into the sky, forcing it closer to the rift, an ominous feeling crept through him. The air shifted, twisting in a vile, unnatural way. This prompted him to glance downward. In that brief moment, he witnessed the supposed creature with merged hands crush a fist into Abyss Tyrant's chest. The impact sent his best summon reeling backward like a discarded puppet, crashing through several buildings. The sound shattered Lithia's silence before all fell still. Then, a line carved itself across the lower face of the abysmal Belial he was currently forcing upward. The creature's face split into a crooked, bone-chilling smile. Chapter 874. One True Self. The twisted grin on its face unsettled Northern. He grimaced darkly as they soared high into the embrace of the sky. With a swift motion, he pushed the creature away and unleashed Echo, following up with an overwhelming impact release that sent the monster hurtling further into the atmosphere. He rolled in the air from his own impact and stabilized in a heartbeat. Within moments, multiple clones popped into existence around him, all hovering in the vast expanse of Lithia's night sky. The Real Northern vanished among the identical floating copies. Each clone wore the same dark grimace as the original. Northern suspected the abysmal Belial had silently communicated with the devilish Belial the instant it broke free from its bound hands. Their connection to the environment must be linked to their bound hands. It had to be. At first glance, he thought the bindings were part of their creation, until he took a deeper, more careful look. He barely had time to understand the purpose of the bound hands before the devilish Belial battling the Abyss Tyrant somehow broke free from it. Drawing on his monster knowledge, Northern concluded the creature had interacted with the environment long enough to unlock a portion of its abilities beyond the rift. Abilities clearly connected to its bound hands. The real problem was that the crafty bastard immediately shared this knowledge with the abysmal Belial, giving it a lifeline. Now Northern couldn't destroy the damn monster before it adapted to the environment, all thanks to the devilish Belial. This realization soured his expression like bitter fruit. Yet he wasn't truly worried. The abysmal Belial posed no real threat to him. Plus, Nebulous Lord stood ready nearby. The true danger, the source of Northern's concern, was the hand that remained forever stuck since the rift first appeared. That was the real threat. Northern had never faced a Leviathan before. He kept the Crimson Lord in reserve because of it, but still doubted if that would suffice. He simply didn't know what it would take to kill a Leviathan. More so, there was the evacuation and everything connected to why this blockade started in the first place. With all the commotion, Northern couldn't be certain if Dante and his military personnel had already been alerted, or if spies lurked in Lithia watching silently. Spies or not, it changes nothing. Few people knew the actual plan or the purpose of the strange rift. Any spies had scarce information to report to their masters. And by the time they pieced together the puzzle, it would be too late. Most people didn't even recognize Northern. He was primarily known by Ascendant Zion, Sage Mac, and Paragon Rizel. So there was nothing tangible to report to the military, and Lieutenant Dante wouldn't know he was the one. As long as he is not somewhere here himself. A terrifying shriek tore through the atmosphere, making the very air tremble. Northern snapped his attention toward the abysmal abomination. Across the sky, hundreds of his duplicates responded identically. All eyes turned to the source of the bone-chilling sound. I hope this isn't too much. Northern's cloning differed from others, especially now with one true self. Each clone carried a substantial portion of his power. Of course, he controlled exactly how much strength they wielded. Certain limitations existed. The more clones he summoned, the smaller the power slice each received. He already had one clone holding 50%. So these 100 clones, excluding himself, shared only the remaining 50% among themselves. This 50% encompassed his total power. Not just talents, but everything related to chaos, void, his physical form, and all attributes. The unique aspect of this EX cloning ability was that each duplicate shared his cognitive abilities in a pseudoactive state. Northern could easily enter the mind of any clone and control their actions. Yet they could also think and act independently as versions of himself, capable of volatility and growth. That growth potential unnerved him somewhat. Northern pondered how it would feel if multiple versions of himself existed out there, growing stronger and making their own impact on the world. I definitely should try that someday. He braced himself as the Belial plummeted from the sky with frightening velocity. Before it could crash into the crowd of floating clones, something black streaked through the air like midnight lightning and collided with the creature mid-descent. The impact unleashed a fearsome shockwave that rippled outward, distorting the very fabric of space around them. Northern watched in awe as Nebulous Lord matched the monster's strength, locking hands with the abysmal Belial. But the creature had 4 hands, while Nebulous Lord had just 2. As this thought crossed Northern's mind, his eyes widened in shock. 2 additional hands sprouted from beneath Nebulous Lord's normal ones, seizing the abysmal Belial's remaining limbs before they could strike. Another pair of arms emerged from Nebulous Lord's shoulder region, his skin rippling like black liquid as the new limbs stretched outward. Without hesitation, Nebulous Lord hammered the abysmal abomination mercilessly. Each blow produced a thunderous, sickening sound that filled the skies with a hollow, malevolent sense of dread. The battle seemed painfully one-sided as Nebulous Lord brutalized the creature. Down in Lithia, people shivered as the terrifying sounds echoed from above, chilling them to their very cores. But Northern was far from pleased. That bastard isn't taking any damage. The battering sounds grew louder and more thunderous, a primal rhythm that spoke of Nebulous Lord's mounting frustration as the monster refused to buckle under his relentless assault. Nebulous Lord retracted the 2 hands from his shoulders for a brief respite. In that fleeting moment, the eyes of the abysmal abomination gleamed with twisted malice. With sudden ferocity, it wrenched one of its hands free from Nebulous Lord's grasp. Nebulous Lord's grip was so unyielding that the monster tore the arm from the shoulder joint with its desperate force. Yet even then, the iron hold didn't release. Northern's face drained of color as he watched Nebulous Lord's arm get torn off with such shocking ease. He felt wounded, like a child watching his new toy break before his eyes. That's it. Enough watching. This bastard is definitely going to pay for damages. Chapter 875, The Battle of Clones. The night sky fractured like a mirror as Northern's clones surged forward. 100 figures blurred into motion, their movements synchronized yet chaotic, like a swarm of starlings twisting as one. Fire erupted from their left hands, crimson tongues lashing the dark, while ice crystallized in their right, jagged shards glinting like broken diamonds. The air rebelled, groaning under the duality of scorching heat and glacial cold. After yanking away Nebulous Lord's arms, the abysmal Belial glared with wicked intensity. The demented grin on its face only widened as it shifted its full attention to the storm of clones flying toward it. It lunged, its 4 arms splayed like the spokes of a wheel. Where its clawed fingers grazed the air, trails of blackened distortion followed, as though reality itself charred at its touch. Northern's clones struck first. A barrage of flames engulfed the creature, roaring like an unleashed furnace. But the inferno slid harmlessly off its obsidian skin, which drank the light like a hungry void. The Belial's grin stretched wider, jagged teeth gleaming. One clone swung an ice blade at its throat. Crack. The weapon shattered. The clone barely recoiled before the Belial's hand seized its arm. The clone's limb turned to ash in an instant, the necrosis spreading like ink in water. Northern felt phantom pain lance through his nerves via link. A searing, silent annihilation. The clone dissolved into smoke, its power snapping back into him like a released spring. A dark frown fell across his face as he witnessed this. With the creature's affinity to something burnt, Northern had suspected it was significant to its essence. They were called burnt embers, at least the behemoth ones. The destroyers were burnt slag. These Belials were burnt cinder. They had strong connections to burning, or to things already burnt. Northern knew that much, just not exactly what it meant. Seeing his clone vanish into ash, he now understood. His decision to use clones to battle the creature stemmed from these suspicions. So while he looked slightly displeased, events unfolded within his control, exactly as predicted. The clones shifted tactics. Fire and ice collided mid-air, steam erupting in a scalding veil. The Belial thrashed, momentarily blinded. Northern's true body flickered behind it, fists glowing with a dark, sinister aura. He struck its spine. Tum! The sound of a depth charge detonating underwater. The impact reverberated, delayed, as the creature twisted away. The air where the Belial should have been imploded. A shockwave tore outward, shredding clouds into wisps. The monster staggered, one leg buckling as the delayed force crippled its momentum. Northern didn't relent. Clones rained down, fists and blades hammering its body in a staccato rhythm. Each strike multiplied on impact by echo. But the Belial's laugh gurgled through the assault, wet and jagged. His 4 hands shot out, faster than thought. 2 clones erupted into cinders mid-swing, their ashes scattering like fireflies. A 3rd clone ducked, ice surging from its palms to form a shield. The Belial's claw scraped the surface, and the shield crumbled to black dust, frost evaporating with a hiss like a dying scream. The creature's aura pulsed as a palpable force now, a dry, suffocating heat that parched throats and singed eyelashes. Northern's lungs burned with every breath his clones took. He tasted ash through their tongues, felt the prickle of sweat freezing on their skin as they circled tighter. One hurled a glacier-sized spear. The Belial caught it, and the ice rotted from tip to base, collapsing into a heap of soot. Northern grinned. Don't underestimate my clones. The moment the creature caught the spear, a deafening sound exploded through the air. The clone had released a massive impact from the block, crushing the abysmal abomination with raw force. The Belial's body convulsed as internal concussions rippled through it, its indestructible skin quivering like a drumhead. A crack split the air, louder than thunder, and the creature screamed. The sound echoed like glass shattering in an empty cathedral. Its legs buckled, but its grin never faltered. One hand plunged into the chest of a nearby clone, reducing it to cinders, while another arm lashed upward, raking the sky. Another northern materialized above, fists wrapped in intertwining helixes of undulating flames. He slammed them downward. The collision birthed a supernova of steam and cantaloupe sparks, exploding outward like a miniature sun. The Belial's arm snapped up to block, and Northern's knuckles grazed its wrist just before the impact sent the creature hurtling downward. Fire without heat raced up Northern's arm. His skin blackened, cells dying in a wave. He severed the connection before the necrosis reached his shoulder, watching another clone disintegrating. His real body reeled back, teeth gritted. He watched a terrible shockwave ripple across the center of the city, demolishing several buildings, crushing them and flinging debris in a massive circular torrent that would have shredded people had they been present. Fortunately, that part of Lithia stood vacant, and before the shockwave reached the city center, its force had somewhat diminished. Northern squinted, clicking his tongue in visible irritation. Of course, that wouldn't kill you. The Belial surged upward, grinning dementedly, its four arms carving the air into ribbons of distortion. Northern's clones swarmed, sacrificing themselves in bursts of wind, flame and ice to stall the creature. One detonated a glacial explosion at its feet, freezing its legs momentarily. Another unleashed a firestorm to blind it. A third hovered higher, veins pulsing with power. He concentrated Echo into his palm until it hummed like a captive star, then dove. The Belial sensed him. It wrenched free from the ice, one hand lunging to intercept. Northern twisted mid-fall, letting the claw graze his ribs. His flesh charred instantly, a white-hot brand searing his side, but his hand found the creature's chest. Echo, and release. The stored impacts, dozens of strikes from the clones, erupted at once. The sky split. A shockwave tore through the Belial, bending its body like a bow. Its scream pierced the clouds, raw and guttural. Cracks spiderwebbed across its chest, not in its skin, but in the air around it, as though the emptiness beneath were fracturing. The creature plummeted, cratering the earth below in a plume of dust and debris. Northern hovered amidst his remaining clones, all breathing raggedly. His duplicates flickered, their numbers halved. Chaos knitted his scorched ribs slowly, fire dancing at his fingertips. Below, the dust cleared. The abysmal Belial lay motionless, its grin finally slack, until its head twitched. One finger curled. Northern's blood froze. The creature's skin began to melt, not into liquid, but into a swirling vortex of black sand. It rose, reforging itself grain by grain, its laughter now a low, grinding hum. The air filled with the bitter tang of ozone and decay. Chapter 876, True Abysmal Belial. The air wailed as the abysmal Belial emerged, its new form a paradox, simultaneously corporeal and abstract, like a phantom carved from darkness itself. For arms ended in hands that stretched in a twisted, unnatural manner, nearly touching the ground, their fingertips bending light into carnival mirror distortions. As it walked, the ground didn't crumble. It vanished, dissolving into fine ash that left strange voids in the concrete floor. Northern's remaining clones hovered in the sky, their breaths shallow and harsh, all wearing the same defiant, stubborn expression. The creature stalked forward, leaving holes in the concrete with each step. They waited in taut silence until the creature glanced up. Its crimson eyes blazed with such intense red flame that Northern felt ice creep down his spine. Then it shot up. For the first time, a movement forced open Chaos' eyes, and Northern could not still catch up with the movement. If there even was one. He paled, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched the creature snatch one of his clones and turn it to ash. Of course, all Northern's clones possessed nearly his full capabilities, so they already lunged toward the beast. Each activated different talents. Fire roared hungrily. Ice spears materialized from thin air, filling the sky like winter's arsenal. Wind howled and sliced through the atmosphere, carving ugly scars across nearby buildings. All the clones, in the flash of barely a second, descended upon the abysmal Belial that hovered in the air, a twisted grin etched on its face. The creature floated motionless, not even shifting its gaze from the empty swirl of ash that had just left its demonic hands. Finally, it turned its attention to the clones, just as they crashed into it in a violent tempest. Its 4 arms moved in a hypnotic blur, each parry reducing a clone to cinders. But Northern had learned. He wouldn't simply repeat the same strategy. Or maybe he would, but with his vast arsenal of techniques, he never had to stop experimenting with different combinations. His clones began to wink in and out of existence, their movements layered like overlapping film reels. One hurled a comet of fire that blazes violently, only to dissolve as the Belial swatted it, revealing another clone behind, slamming an echo-charged fist into its ribs. The delayed impact detonated seconds later, a subterranean boom that rattled teeth in skulls miles below. They didn't pause or relent. The clones fused the terrifying sharp winds of Whispering Gale with ice spears, conjuring a blizzard of ice lances moving at bullet speeds. The Belial raised a palm. SSSSSSK. The projectiles charred mid-air, disintegrating into black snow. Another clone darted between them, wielding stainless with terrifying yellow lightning that sliced across the air as it swung the blade. The blade halted as one of the abysmal Belial's hands lazily rose to meet it. Then, with a simple twist of its hand, Stainless snapped. Fortunately, it was merely a clone sword. The clone grinned and seized the moment to launch itself forward, black flame erupting from its hands. As it collided with the Belial, the violent impact thundered through the dark clouds. Only upon contact did the Belial's eyes suddenly widen with realization. This was not a clone. The creature had touched Northern, but its decay was taking longer than it had with the rest of the clones. Northern grinned. "Bye, Black Lance." Then he vanished using Shadow Step, a void ability that let him disappear and reappear at will. Its right torso still suffered from sinister flames dancing on its shoulder when the creature suddenly shifted. A black lance of light materialized from nowhere, threatening to split the sky apart. And just as it appeared, it vanished barely a heartbeat later. Northern grimaced when he reappeared. What the hell just happened? He had never seen Black Lance so ineffective. Black Lance operated by delivering only cleaves that the target could receive. However, the concept had just failed. Somehow, impossibly, the creature had momentarily reduced itself to weigh nothing, allowing Black Lance to pass through harmlessly. The most terrifying part was how quickly it had understood the attack. Northern had never encountered a monster of this caliber. He grimaced. No time to think. Northern wove his hands in intricate patterns from where he floated. His clones surged forward, shielding him, more materializing by the second. The creature prepared to move, ready to intercept them all, but suddenly froze, unable to advance. It strained against the imperceptibly thin threads restraining it, but the harder it fought, the more immobile it became. The clones crashed into it with devastating attacks, combining techniques in deadly harmony. The sky erupted in a breathtaking symphony of unusual chaos. Ice bloomed in the darkness. Waves of fire roared with the power of dark thunder. Wind carved through everything in its path. Lightning descended like divine judgment. Each devastating blow multiplied through echo, their impacts separated and uniquely applied by full impact's return. The clash produced an unspeakable sound, a wet, resonant boom that liquefied the clouds. The Belial vanished within a strange tempest that momentarily obscured everything. Northern watched intently from his position. From the storm of destruction, something plummeted and smashed into the ground, drawing a satisfied smile across Northern's face. But the victory was short-lived. The entire Lithia shuddered. Fractured earth convulsed, devouring itself as the Belial rose. Not healed, but reborn. Its skin now pulsed with volcanic cracks, heat radiating in visible waves that transformed the air into a shimmering mirage. Where it stepped, stone melted into glass. Its laughter echoed like breaking ice, deep and final. "Come on? Do you really have to make me resort to my second-to-last solution?" Northern's voice carried frustration beneath his casual tone. But the Belial showed no concern. It moved. It flickered, a corpse-like blur, and a clone imploded, crumbling to ash before it could react. Another perished mid-leap, the lightning in its hands fading to harmless sparks. The creature was evolving, its movements shifting from wild swipes to calculated, almost elegant strikes. Soul threads lashed out again, binding the Belial's wrists, but it yanked, dragging 3 clones into a vortex of decay. Their screams dissolved into static. Enough. Chapter 877. A jaw-breaking battle. No doubt about it. The monster was a true abysmal Belial, living up to its rank and danger level. It far outclassed several monsters Northern had fought until now. And it was growing stronger. Interesting as it was to entertain its rampage, the battle was dragging on too long. Moreover, Abyss Tyrant had just finished his own fight. Northern could tell because he felt a surge of talent fragments flood into him. He needed to end this quickly so he, Paragon Rizel, and the others could address that hanging hand. He gazed grimly at the creature as his clones parted, creating a pathway. Playtime's over, buddy. Northern spread his palms and instantly, a purple light began to pulse on his skin. The light in his eyes shifted to purple too, blazing with primal, eerie malevolence. He advanced toward the abysmal Belial and stared at it with a deadpan expression. His hand moved forward but halted midway. Northern raised a brow and glanced back as a distant building collapsed from a shockwave, something launching off it. Nebulous Lord? Indeed, Nebulous Lord hurtled toward them at frightening speed, propelled by black, jagged skeletal wings. He looked altered. His skin carried the same charred tone as the behemoth they'd fought, though everything else remained the evolved Black Mamba, Nebulous Lord. But his skin now appeared scorched. Northern felt mild surprise. Did he eat one of those flying behemoths? That was the only logical explanation. Nebulous Lord had consumed a behemoth and gained control over its soul. Perhaps one he'd defeated? Northern sidestepped in the air, allowing the void monster to crash into the abysmal Belial, sending it skyward. The sky split open. The abysmal Belial twisted midair, its segmented spine flexing and realigning as vast black wings unfurled from its back. Its limbs sliced through clouds like blades through silk. Its massive form stopped with a single beat of the new infernal wings, their membrane woven from shadow, sinew, and blistering heat. It hung motionless, then plummeted. Nebulous Lord intercepted it. 2 forces, burnt and burning, crashed with the wail of tortured air. Shockwaves tore across the battlefield like invisible blades, carving channels through ruined buildings and ripping chunks from fractured earth. Craters formed beneath them from the raw power of their collision. Steel shrieked in the distance as towering structures warped and cracked under the pressure. Glass fragments danced like embers, glinting in the darkened sky. The abysmal Belial struck first, sleek, curved talons that didn't cut but erased. A wall of force burst from the swing, turning the ground to molten ruin. Where it touched, the world ignited, not with fire, but with fire's finality. A tense fabric vanished before it could burn. A metal automation on the street crumbled to ash. No smoke, no embers, just the aftermath of destruction made manifest. But Nebulous Lord stood firm. In this new form he was now a catastrophic behemoth, a charred ash, his body already scorched and hardened. He absorbed the deathly touch like stone absorbs rain. Smoke rose from his limbs, not from pain but from defiance. He unleashed a thunderous roar. A guttural sound erupted from deep within his chest, sharp and raw, like magma breaking free. His wings snapped open, and with a deafening boom, he surged forward, each movement skimming through air, shattering sound. They collided again. One of the abysmal Belial's arms, barbed with what looked like crystallized black bone, whipped forward, cutting through the battlefield like a scythe. Nebulous Lord ducked beneath it, his form blurring with impossible speed, trailing clouds of obsidian smoke. His clawed hand shot upward, burying deep into the abysmal Belial's ribcage. A pulse rippled outward, like a stone dropped in still water. Pieces of the monster's armor-like flesh broke away, falling in chunks of glowing, blackened mass. Yet instead of retreating, it pressed closer, jaws unhinging like a predator unafraid of its own wounds. Rows of luminous teeth locked into place. Then, it exhaled. The breath wasn't air. It was oblivion, a heatless, soundless gust that erased the very essence of existence. The soil beneath Nebulous Lord's feet dissolved into nothingness. Stone liquefied without warmth. Color faded. And yet Nebulous Lord endured. His charred body shimmered in the dying gust but held firm. His skin peeled and split further, flaking like scorched bark, but at his core, his essence remained untouched. Whatever curse or blessing he'd consumed had taken root deep within. His eyes, glowing white with a black ring around them, locked onto the abysmal abominations. No rage.
No pride.
Only cold calculation. A will unbroken. He struck. No warning.
No preparación.
Just force. He slammed his shoulder into the abysmal Belial's gut, lifting the monster. Ribs splintered. Breath vanished. They shot upward, clashing again midair like colliding meteors, then spiraled downward. The ground rushed to meet them. They smashed into it. Earth split into a ring-shaped canyon. Buildings within a 2-block radius folded like paper. Dust and ash swept across the horizon. The air itself seemed wounded. From the crater's center something moved. The abysmal Belial stood first, body twisted, wings crooked, flesh peeling like melted wax. Yet its presence grew heavier, as if pain fueled its power. 2 arms dangled by thin strands of sinew, dragging like a dead snake. Then it pressed one of its broken arm against the crater floor. A ripple spread outward like a wave. And everything within a 100-meter radius simply ended. Not burned, not crushed, simply ceased to exist. The surrounding buildings vanished from reality. Time forgot them. The sky above the crater faded to a lifeless gray. But Nebulous Lord remained. Smoke poured from his back like a dark cloak. His charred skin hissed where it tried to heal, only to burn again from the strange new air, creating an endless cycle of destruction. But he stood unmoved. Northern watched from afar, his face drained of color. Who could have imagined that, in just a handful of minutes, the abysmal Belial would master essence manifestation? Is this what I would have missed if I had used Oblivion's mark? He had been so close to stripping the creature's abilities and humiliating it, if not for Nebulous Lord's interruption. But now, he couldn't help but enjoy the spectacle. Nebulous Lord lunged forward, ducked beneath another strike, and drove his jagged elbow into the creature's chest. It howled. An unholy sound. The cry of an ancient beast never meant to bleed. Black fluid erupted from its mouth, splattering across the battlefield in streams that burned holes into space itself. Then came the claws. Nebulous Lord unleashed them. Not mere blades, but massive hooks, curved and notched, like the bones of a dying god. He tore into the creature's side, not cutting, ripping, as if determined to tear it apart completely. The abysmal Belial fought back, its remaining hand closing over Nebulous Lord's face. And for a moment the world dimmed. Everything froze. Then, flash. Chapter 878. Growth. A white burst of nothingness consumed the crater. The landscape quaked violently, sending crude vibrations through the wind to where Northern floated. The battle between Nebulous Lord and the abysmal Belial had grown intense, devastatingly intense in just minutes. Even Abyss Tyrant, finished with his own fight, stood beside Paragon Rizel on a distant building, silently watching the catastrophic clash unfold. Paragon Rizel's face revealed a tangled web of emotions. Confusion ravaged the poor man to his core. He had never witnessed a battle like this. Northern felt the same. He had fought many terrifying battles himself, but watching one of this magnitude was unprecedented. He understood Burning Storm's struggle to comprehend this chaos. As the dust settled, both monsters stood, breathing, trembling, but alive. A demented red light burned in the abysmal Belial's eyes, while a white spark of mad determination glowed in the depths of Nebulous Lord's. Then the abysmal Belial moved. Fast. its silhouette blurred, then vanished, materializing behind Nebulous Lord with a shriek of tearing wind. Before impact, space around its claws folded inward like crumpled paper. The strike connected. Nebulous Lord's head snapped sideways. The sound, like a mountain crushing under an avalanche, echoed across the ruins. His body hurled backward, a thunderclap marking his path. Walls crumbled in a 10-meter arc. A crater formed where he landed, ground sinking beneath his weight. Before he could rise, the abysmal Belial pounced. One leg dropped like heaven's judgment, knee first into his chest. The shockwave vaporized surrounding debris. Dust columns shot skyward. Cracks spread for hundreds of meters like veins across Earth. Below them, buried sewer lines ruptured. A tremor raced through the ruined cityscape, knocking Northern back in midair. Nebulous Lord's ribcage shattered. He twitched, but the damned abomination pressed on. Its claws seized him by the wings and dragged him. Across concrete, over scorched steel and broken remnants of market stalls. Nebulous Lord's body split open on debris, dark fluid marking a trail of destruction. Each pull wrenched joints apart. Each second ground bone to powder. Then it hurled him. Nebulous Lord crashed through a 6-story building. Concrete exploded on impact. Steel bars bent around him like ribbon. He burst from the opposite side in a cloud of dust, barely steadying himself before the abysmal Belial flashed before him again. It moved too fast, landing another blow, this time to the chest. An uppercut charged with spatial compression. It didn't merely launch Nebulous Lord skyward, it twisted his trajectory. He spun midair, cutting across the battlefield like a fallen meteor, smashing through a hillside on the crater's edge. Boom! The hillside crumbled, and the world shuddered with it. A pause. Just a heartbeat. Then boom boom boom, the abysmal Belial marched forward. Each step compressed air so violently it created visible ripples. The battlefield darkened further under its presence. Its arms peeled back as it exhaled, breathing annihilation again. The air in its path turned to static, buzzing and folding inward. It meant to erase Nebulous Lord completely. From the rubble of the collapsed hillside, Nebulous Lord emerged, but barely. One knee buckled. One wing hung shredded and useless. His head lifted slowly, painfully. A hole gaped in his chest. He didn't roar. He didn't growl. He endured through agony. But the abysmal Belial was already there. It seized his head and drove it into the earth. Once, twice, thrice. Each impact sent a shockwave outward. Trees in the distance bent backward at impossible angles, their trunks snapping from the force. The ground around them sank, caving beneath the overwhelming pressure. Nebulous Lord's skull cracked loudly on the third blow, ash pouring from his mouth. The abysmal Belial hoisted him up, hurled him into the sky, and then touched the ground again. Its essence manifestation expanded once more. A second wave of spatial denial swept across the terrain, widening the lifeless ring. Everything within its reach simply vanished from reality. The air grew thick. No sound, no movement, just terrible stillness. Northern narrowed his eyes. What in the hell? Even the sky was fading to ash. But as the abysmal Belial took flight again, wings spread, about to deliver the final strike. The ground beneath it hissed. A dull, low heat flickered from cracks in the earth. A slow, steady breath. Not a flame. A burning. The opposite of the abysmal Belial's domain. Where it erased the memory of burning, this was the process, stretched infinitely. The earth began to cook. The soil glowed. Black steam rose from below. And from above, Nebulous Lord fell back. His broken body landed on its feet. Smoke poured from his mouth like a dragon exhaling destruction. And something had changed. The ground around him wavered. Not with light, but with heat, thick and suffocating, like a furnace awakening inside the world. The sky above took on a bloody hue, clouds streaked with threads of ember and glowing coal. This was no longer the abysmal Belial's world. It was his, a domain born not of death, but of endless, relentless suffering. where nothing vanished, only burned slowly, constantly, denied release. Northern exhaled. He's awakening his own manifestation. It made sense. Nebulous was now a catastrophic behemoth. They could connect with their environment and imprint their will upon it.
Evoking essence manifestation.
If Nebulous Lord possessed anything in abundance, it was an insurmountable and dangerous will. A thin smile formed on Northern's face. Good. Good. This is so good. He watched like a spectator at the ultimate battle. It was exhilarating. The abysmal Belial's essence flickered. His claws twitched. Then it dropped. Fast. Straight down. But this time, when it reached the boundary of Nebulous Lord's domain, it slowed. As if time thickened. Its wings dragged like syrup. Its form distorted in the heat haze. The very act of movement became torture. Nebulous Lord stood motionless. He raised a hand. The air ignited. Not with fire, but with weight. The burning space wrapped around the abysmal Belial like molten chains, pulling at its wings, its joints, its essence. The monster screamed. It twisted midair, forcing its way down with raw power, and struck. Another clash, but this time, it faltered. Nebulous Lord caught the blow, and the ground remained whole beneath him. The abysmal Belial did not. Its wrist shattered from the impact, a spiral fracture climbing to the elbow. The burning had taken hold. The tide was turning, and the war between obliteration and torment was only beginning. Chapter 879. The Malevolent Nebulous Lord. The sky was no longer gray with silence. It burned. A slow, steady blaze hung across the clouds like a dragon's breath. The air wavered, dense and distorted, as if reality itself gasped beneath the heat. Everything within Nebulous Lord's essence manifestation simmered under its touch, not instantly devoured, but caught in the endless process of consumption. The abysmal Belial howled like a tortured spirit, but its wings sagged, its movements dulled. Its four limbs, once precise and deadly, now dragged slightly, burdened by a heat it couldn't escape. And Nebulous Lord moved. Without warning, without flourish, just raw power. He appeared behind the abysmal Belial, just as the abomination had done to him. Only this time it wasn't speed. It was gravity. The air split with a violent sound. Nebulous Lord's fist crashed into the side of the creature's skull. Crack. The sound rolled like thunder trapped in stone. The monster's neck twisted, the force hurling its massive form sideways, sliding across scorched earth, carving lines of fire in its wake. Before it could rise, Nebulous Lord loomed above it. His knee dropped like an asteroid into the creature's abdomen. The impact shattered the ground beneath them, the force rippling through every broken wall, every fractured beam in the ruins nearby. A new crater formed, deeper and wider than before. Molten rock bubbled up through cracks in the earth. The abysmal Belial trembled, its body not just broken, but pinned down by the weight of the burning world around it. Nebulous Lord pressed on. A twisted smile formed on his charred face as he seized the abysmal Belial by its wings, and dragged, across sharp stone, over glowing metal, through pools of liquid earth. The black fluid it bled ignited instantly, trailing behind like a comet's tail. Each pull carved trenches in the ground. Each movement fed the flames higher. Then, he threw it. The abysmal Belial tore through 3 ruined buildings. The first collapsed completely. The second bent sideways before crumbling in a cloud of steam. The third exploded as the monster smashed through its core, a fiery spiral marking its path. The sky caught the monster and flung it back down, and Nebulous Lord waited below. He leapt.
No grace.
Just vengeance. His claws spread wide and tore across the creature's chest mid-fall, sinking deep. Then he drove it downward. Not thrown. Hammered. Their impact cracked the very crust of the battlefield. Shockwaves spread in a perfect circle, flipping entire streets, uprooting blackened trees, and sending flocks of scorched birds fleeing from the sky. And then, he seized its head. Northern watched, and he flinched, because he knew what was coming. Nebulous Lord's charred fingers locked around the skull of the abysmal Belial. He smashed it into the molten floor. Once, a column of ash erupted skyward. Twice, a shock wave tore the air apart. Thrice, the earth wailed. The abysmal Belial's head cracked against the glowing rock. The protection of its own essence manifestation long vanished. Its wings quivered weakly. Dark fluid sprayed in long, curving arcs, hissing against the heated air. Then Nebulous Lord hoisted it, and launched it upward. High, so high it pierced through the final layer of ash-stained clouds. For a moment the monster vanished, a dark silhouette against an even darker sky. Nebulous Lord crouched, muscles tensing, black vapor rising from his limbs. Then he sprang, and pursued it. As the abysmal Belial began to plummet, pulled by gravity, Nebulous Lord intercepted it midair. 2 extra hands erupted beneath his usual pair, and all his claws extended, not to tear but to capture. He caught its wrists, and snapped them. All the abysmal Belial's arms hung limp now, useless, broken things. Then, with momentum still carrying him upward, he drove his knee into the creature's gut. Again, and again, and again. Each blow shattered ribs, sent tremors through the still-burning sky. A brutal rhythm of vengeance, of balance restored. Then came the descent. The monster fell first. Nebulous Lord followed like retribution itself. Together they plunged, but only one controlled their path. And when they crashed to earth, Nebulous Lord landed atop it. Kneeling, dominant, the abysmal Belial lay motionless. Its body smoldered, limbs twitching, its essence unraveling. Its manifestation had faded, overpowered by the relentless burn that now consumed the battlefield. Its mouth gaped to scream, and Nebulous Lord reached down, clawed fingers wrapping around the creature's throat. Then, without hesitation, he crushed it. Nebulous Lord radiated a sinister white light as he loomed over his prey. The silence returned. But it was not peace. Nebulous Lord towered above the broken form of the abysmal Belial, its crushed remains still quivering, dark fluid seeping from fractures across its body. Smoke coiled from his shoulders, rising like the breath of a slumbering volcano. The air around them rippled, not from heat, but from something primordial, more ancient. Northern squinted from where he stood. Then Chaos' eyes activated instinctively. It's not over. He was right. The abysmal Belial's remains stirred, but not with life, with something beyond physical grasp. Though it felt substantial, it remained untouchable, a presence flooding the atmosphere with overwhelming pressure. Northern's expression darkened as he struggled against the strain burning through his mind. What is this? It can't be. Could it be the evolution beyond essence manifestation? It was a Belial after all, equal to a luminary in rank. Essence manifestation should merely be the beginning of its capabilities. There existed greater heights to its power, made unnaturally malevolent by its corrupted nature as an abysmal evil. Northern's frown deepened, dangerously deep. Something shattered inside the Belial, not physically but metaphysically. A tear opened within its core, born not from damage but from desperation. Its essence, broken, humiliated, and cornered, sought escape beyond flesh. Its body split with a sound like ancient gates opening to the unnatural darkness. And then, the abysmal Belial vanished. Its flesh peeled away in ribbons of burning light, unraveling like the fabric of reality itself. A vortex of embers spiraled outward, driving Nebulous Lord back several steps. The ground beneath where the corpse had lain began to darken. Not burn, not char, but cease. Color drained from it. Form dissolved. In its place rose something else. Something intangible yet profound. Chapter 880. Concept Destroyer. Since meeting the Emperor of Luingard, Northern had begun to develop certain theories. The evolution of his own talents to EX class further validated these hypotheses. Yet gaps remained unfilled despite his theoretical explorations. This age simply hadn't witnessed such terrifying concentrations of power as luminaries, and paragons were scarce encounters. his research and observations remained limited. His conclusions were fragile, vulnerable to collapse when confronted with hard evidence. Still, this much he knew. Monsters and drifters shared three common elements: talent, soul, and true name. These three factors determined the trajectory of their soul's evolution. Drifters likely evolved toward the stellar while monsters evolved away from it. This suggested that as a drifter's soul evolved, they increasingly resembled their origin constellation. The soul played a crucial role in this evolution, but once one reached paragon status, that role likely became too expansive and inefficient. At that point, one probably needed to discover their relationship with the world, a connection closely tied to how their talent related to their true name. True names had remained the most elusive puzzle for centuries. Many scholarly drifters had invested their efforts, yet few achieved meaningful progress. Those few were either lost to history or their knowledge jealously guarded by higher authorities determined to keep such secrets. This was partly why Northern hadn't finished with the Academy Library. But coming to Lithia had helped fill gaps in his understanding. Meeting Paragon Rizel had confirmed several of his theories. And now, witnessing the monster's desperate transformation further validated his thinking, revealing the power that lay beyond essence manifestation, the force that a luminary likely commanded. And perhaps the key to becoming a luminary, to making the progression slightly more accessible. Something rose from the ground. It was like a cloud of dark ashes, spreading. It was a silhouette without body, a will without anchor, a flame that did not flicker but watched. Not fire, not energy, a concept in and of itself. The abysmal Belial, in its final gasp, had invoked a forbidden instinct locked deep in its monstrous core, a height of power that not every Belial could execute, despite every Belial having it buried in the cores of their soul. It was now incorporeal, an echo of burning given form. It did not move. The world moved around it as if carrying it. Time seemed to warp in ripples. Shadows grew long and thin, curling toward it like mourners. The sky above them flickered between gray decay, as if even the heavens were unsure how to accommodate this new presence. And then the voice came. Not sound, not thought, just presence. The presence seemed to gain a voice that registered in the soul of everyone around dread. It was terrible, horrible, and made the very soul of everyone standing around it and watching writhe in an inexplicable agony. The incorporeal Belial moved, not through space but into it. It phased through reality, flickering like a broken reflection. Trees wilted in its wake. The wind died. Buildings nearby lost their third dimension, flattened into drawings, impressions of what they once were. It surged toward Nebulous Lord. No body, just death. But Nebulous Lord stood firm, unmoving and unbothered. The burn around him did not recede, it flared. His manifestation ignited, wrapping the battlefield in a crucible of infinite suffering. The incorporeal flame wavered. For the first time it hesitated. And Nebulous Lord moved. He didn't dodge. He entered it, walked directly into the heart of the incorporeal form. Everything around them halted. A pause. A deep, awful quiet. Then, he screamed. But not in pain. In rejection. Nebulous Lord's body glowed from within, white-hot cracks splitting across his charred skin. His wings opened fully, skeletal frames illuminated with searing intensity. Flames exploded outward from his body, not outwardly destructive, but internally consuming. He wasn't attacking the Belial's shell. He was burning its concept, its right to exist. The incorporeal flame thrashed. Time buckled. Space hiccuped. Reality twisted, unable to decide if the Belial was alive or dead or merely memory. But Nebulous Lord held it. Fists clenched. Eyes white. He forced it back into form, ripping its essence from the incorporeal veil, dragging it, reshaping it, making it tangible. And then he crushed it again. One hand on its half-manifested skull, the other driving into its chest. Nebulous Lord imploded the abysmal Belial's core. Not just the body, but its very attempt to grasp a new height of power. That will, that pushed it onto a new form of self-acknowledgement, the desperate will that became a concept and threatened everyone. It screamed, the cry of a thing denied escape. Its incorporeal form fractured into slivers of darkness and orange light, like shards of shattered will, and scattered into the smog. Gone. Dead. Nebulous Lord exhaled. And the battlefield answered. The burning paused, then faded. The sky lost its ember hue, returning black. The earth, still cracked, no longer hissed. Silence fell again. But this time it was peace. Northern finally touched down. He walked slowly toward the center of the battlefield, eyes locked on Nebulous Lord. The void monster was slowly changing, reverting form. Its body hissed with black smoke, as the wings melted into vapor and his charred skin subtly shifted color. A pale smile appeared on Northern's face. If he understood what Nebulous Lord just did. He defeated a Belial, an abysmal Belial. That means, as if to respond to his next stream of thoughts, Nebulous Lord crouched down and grabbed the corpse of the creature, then he used his lustrous black claws to rip its flesh. A line tore open on its face, revealing sharp shark-like teeth. Nebulous Lord began to eat the abysmal Belial. Northern watched with a pale look on his face. The look got even paler as the seconds crawled by. Eventually, Nebulous Lord stopped and slowly began to claw at the ground, soundlessly writhing in pain. The poor creature, kneeling down, crushed the ground as it tried to resist the harrowing thing raising through his soul and changing it with crude intensity. Northern continued to stare. His pale smile had become a slight frown. Don't tell me. Then he saw. Congratulations. Void Monster. Nebulous Lord is evolving to a new rank. Northern's eyes widened.
Hell no.
If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.